Alright, guys, welcome to Talking Shhh IT with Tony and Glenn. Yay!
Thanks, Ange. We were thinking about getting started tonight by going over a couple of videos. Thinking about doing one that was about home studio setups. Tony and I were talking about earlier. Seeing about what we should get in there. One of them was about the different interfaces and which ones to look at, and the other one was about which components to have in the studio in general. So I figured we'd start with the general one. It's from Paul.
Yeah,
Davids.
that's a good one. To understand all the pieces involved.
Yes, get that one shared here.
Are they small Reese's Pieces or are they big Reese's Pieces or are they the mega ones?
Reese's
Just
Pieces are delicious.
Yeah, well, I'm just asking for a friend. I want to make sure I get the answer right.
Reese's are
It's
just a
almost
yes.
Friday.
Reese's are just a yes overall. So
Okay, yes, I like it. Send all of them to me because they're defective. Immediately.
you'll take care of disposing of them properly.
Correct.
This one is from Paul Davids over here. And get him started. I'll go full screen.
Guitar about music, but your desk looks a bit like this, then probably the best investment is to buy more guitars. Is to set up a nice little home studio. And the best thing, it doesn't have to be too expensive if you do it right. And this isn't only for those that want to make their own music, also for practicing and jamming, it's awesome. Recording 10 layers of guitars, adding drums, bass, keys, record your guitar for others. Where do you start? What do you need? So let's decorate our little studio. And let's start with the heart of the operation. These days almost everyone makes music and records music on a computer. It gives you so much flexibility. And it's definitely the easiest, most versatile approach. And it's very well possible that the Mac or PC you're already using will be perfectly suited for making music. These computers these days are so powerful that if you're starting out, you really don't have to worry about performance too much. A mid-range CPU, around 8 gigs of RAM and 128 gigabytes of storage, and you can easily get started. And this is always a sensitive matter, but I'm a PC guy, a Windows guy, and I happen to be trying out the new MacBook M1 that everyone is raving about, but somehow it conflicted with the next thing on this list, so I just stuck with my good old laptop instead. So, let's move on. What if you want to record something? It's either going to be a 1/4 inch jack or an XLR cable. And there's no chance I can plug these into my laptop right now. Our computer may have a little input or an onboard microphone, but these aren't really the quality we're looking for. So this is where this comes in. At number 2, there's the audio interface or sound card. It connects via USB or FireWire, which is most common. Although I guess FireWire is becoming a little bit obsolete and slowly moves towards Thunderbolt, which has even a larger bandwidth than USB 3.0. But that's only available on select Windows devices, by the way, so make sure to check if your computer accepts it. There's always one or more inputs that can be line level for instruments like keys or your guitar amp modeler. It's not on a list, so no worries. Let me put that here. And let's just plug the camper into the sound card. We should see it coming into the computer. Input number 3 and we see it coming in. So apart from the line inputs for these instruments, we also have preamps on board. This makes sure you can run a microphone into it and it will amplify the signal to a level where the computer actually can work with it. Without it, the mic is way too quiet. As far as the output goes, you definitely need 2, left and right, and a headphone output. More outputs is nice if you want to hook some external effects to it, run sound through it and back to the computer. Maybe experiment with different routings and stuff, that's fun. Furthermore, I love to have MIDI in and MIDI out so you can sync all the gear you want to your computer or have the computer control different instruments and pedals. So now we got a computer, we got the interface. Now what? If you make and play all that beautiful music, you do want to hear it, right? So at number 3, a decent pair of headphones. This is definitely the easiest way. You don't have to sit in a fancy room, you don't have to mind the neighbors, the kids, the parents, the dogs, the cats. Nope, just put these on and go from there. I used the Sennheiser HD25 for a long time until they fell apart sort of, and now I got these fancy new ones. And there's a few different types, like there's over-ear or on-ear. These are over-ear. And there's open back like this one or closed back. And they all have different benefits and downsides. I like open back for listening and for mixing, and closed back for recording. And I think over-ear for me is a little more comfortable, but in the end it's all personal. So check and make sure which type will suit your needs. Let's just put it in the studio, continue, because we've got the computer, the interface, we've got the headphones. Your first hit is right around the corner, but not quite yet. Here is number 4, and let's talk mics. Without a mic, you would not be able to hear me, because over here, right out of shot, I've got a boom mic hanging. It's connected with an XLR cable into the audio interface. A different one it is. And a mic can serve so many different purposes. It can record your acoustic guitar, your guitar amp, your voice, or any audio source or instrument you can think of really. And I think it's really a must-have, and it doesn't have to be too expensive. It can range from $50 to anything up to 2K even. And if you're starting out, I suggest trying out a few budget options at first. So in general, there's 3 different types. So a dynamic microphone is really classic for live use, but also for loud audio sources like a guitar cab. This is really a classic, the Shure SM57. We've got the dynamic microphone. So this one is a little more sensitive and runs with 48 volts, phantom power we called it. It runs through the cable into the microphone. And this works well for anything, quiet, loud, they do it all. Acoustic guitars, vocals, and even guitar cabs or drums. Lovely. And then there's a ribbon mic. So they are a little less bright and have a more mellow sound due to the little bit rounded off transients. So they are more smooth. And I like to pair this one up with a condenser or a dynamic mic. So it gets you the best of both worlds. And I made a video on a cool recording technique I like to use on the acoustic guitar, so you can check it out over here. So there's a whole study you can do about mics, like different pickup patterns, small diaphragm or large diaphragm. For now, I guess if you just want to use one microphone, I suggest getting a large diaphragm condenser mic and you're gold. That can do it all. So let's keep that one in the studio. So everything sounds great so far, but I'm forgetting a massive thing right now. Where do we record into? You sure can't use the voice memo app on your computer, right? So we said the heart of the operation is a computer. Now we need something to organize everything on it. At number 5, we find a digital audio workstation. Now let me open up the computer before the loading takes too long. It's a program that runs on the computer and it lets us record guitars, layer vocals on top, add reverb, delay, EQ, compression, add 8 tracks of drums if you wish, run your favorite guitar simulation plugin all at the same time. Really, the sky is the limit. So here you see Ableton Live. That's coming right up. My personal favorite. And let's see what happens if we just record some guitars. All right, here we see the guitar track. So now I can also layer a vocal on top with that XLR cable I just showed you. Oh, by the way, there's one thing you should never ever forget, and that is to hit that like button. Like button. Gently, gently. Awkward. So we can produce, mix, master, everything you need to make and create music. And there's loads of different programs available. Ableton Live, Logic, FL Studio, Cubase, Reason, PreSonus, Studio One. Some shine in different fields where others may lag a little bit, but ultimately they all sort of do the same thing. So find the program you're comfortable with. So very often a sound card like this will ship with a free copy of a light version of your DAW. So that might be a good choice to get started. So doing everything on headphones is doable, but if you're working for a longer period of time, it can get somewhat intense or uncomfortable. Therefore, at number 6, I think a decent set of studio monitors is essential. They are active speakers that just try to make the sound as balanced and transparent as possible. So your music will sound great not only on your system, but on each system for everyone. Great for when you play with something like a Camper or a Helix or a Fractal 2, by the way, if you want to hear yourself nicely. So you plug the cables into the output of the sound card directly into the speaker, and there we are. The size of the monitor should be related to the space where you're using them in. So if your space is small, don't go too big. It just makes no sense. We move on. So I know we're probably all guitarists, but music is more than just guitar. So whenever making it, and here's number 7. I think a little USB or MIDI keyboard can be so helpful. So this is the one I used for the longest time. It's very plasticky, 49 keys, but works great. So this allows you to play all the sounds you want in your DAW. It simply connects with the USB cable. So now the things I can do is play piano. Oh, by the way, there's one thing you should never ever forget. Or drums. Hit that like button, gently, 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 gently. Or strings. Oh, by the way, there's one thing you should never ever forget. Or a cool synthesizer. That like button, gently, gently. So as you heard, whatever you need to finish that banger. And it's so much easier than drawing in MIDI notes, which is just a painstaking exercise. So just learn like a bit of the piano basics. It's not that hard and it's great for everyone to learn. And from there on out, it's just smooth sailing. All right, so we've got most of the essentials down, I guess, but so handy are the things that just make everything a little bit easier. Like at number 8, mic stands. They will save your life, really. I use a short one for guitar amps, a medium one for recording acoustics, for example, and maybe a bigger one for vocals, like standing up. Or if you just want one to do it all, just go for the bigger one and change it so it fits whatever you're tracking. I found that the cheapest ones, even if they do the job, they sort of either break or they don't stay in one place, so they slowly drift away, and that messes up your recording, of course. So maybe go for one class higher and save yourself some troubles. So we've been using them already, but I just want to share it again because they are so easily forgotten. At number 9, it's cables. So make sure you've got a mix of everything like USB, jacks, XLR cables, also jacks to XLRs for maybe for your speakers, balanced, unbalanced. It's the best to connect your mics, your gear, your instruments, your amp modeler. It's difficult to have too many cables, and I found that I simply couldn't use something just because I didn't have the right cable or not enough cables. And my goal is always to making music as hassle-free as possible. That also means having the things by hand you need to hook everything up correctly. So now you're looking at your wallet and you think,
all right, so let me show you how easy this really is. So all you gotta do is pull up the Unison Drum Monkey, press this button.
You said it doesn't have to be too expensive. And indeed, it doesn't. All the gear I've got in the studio, I mean, maybe you've seen the tour, you can check it out over here, the full studio tour. It was collected during a period of almost 20 years. So I started out with my hi-fi speakers connected to my old PC, using software, free software called Audacity. And 7 years ago, I bought this audio interface. 4 years ago, I bought this laptop. It's like gradually investing in new gear. A studio isn't built in one day, so upgrade where necessary and add where you're missing things. And the order is different for everyone, where a singer might use a mic from the get-go. If you're a guitarist that records with an amp modeler, a direct input or output, you probably can do without it in the beginning. And yes, I said 10 things and I only listed 9 so far, because number 10 is a sum of all the things you might want to look at if things get serious, like a dedicated studio desk, or getting acoustic treatment in your room, or a pop filter for your microphone, different preamps, analog recording gear, maybe even a dedicated computer that you can just leave at the desk. Plugging things in and out every time you want to make music can get annoying after time. So, as I said, we try to make everything as hassle-free as possible, as quickly as possible. Anyway, of course I can't test everything or every piece of gear around, so I would love for you to give some recommendations. What is good and affordable gear to start out with? Maybe some things I might have missed, or tips about gear that you think others can't live without in the studio. Or if you've got a question, maybe we can all help each other out and answer some questions in the comments below. That would be really awesome to see. Anyway, thank you so much for watching everyone, and I really do hope this video inspires you some bit to really start to work on your own music. You're
Yes, definitely some good insights there, some stuff that everybody needs and important stuff to go over. We didn't actually go over individual brands of much of the stuff, but it was more just about the general elements that you need to be looking out for in your studio.
Yeah, it was a nice breakdown of all those elements. I was particularly surprised with the Firewire choice until he said at the end that he had bought his interface 7 years ago.
Right.
And that's when Firewire, was kind of the choice back then. Nowadays, USB 3 has really replaced Firewire for interfaces. Nobody wants to buy a Firewire interface in 2021.
Right. We have a couple actually. One of the other videos that we were
And
going to
he's
look
not,
at was on the different types of interfaces, like the best audio interfaces for under $100. And this was from earlier this year.
yeah.
But this one was
And
from
these
In the
are going to
Mix.
be more relevant.
Right.
Yeah, for the interface choices, this will be more relevant because chances are every one of them is going to be USB.
Yeah. So let's see here.
Firewire kind of left a bad taste in a lot of musicians' mouths, over the last decade, because the hardware was great, but the computers, Firewire ports were not, and they really killed that particular interface.
Yeah. It's like, so this one was In the Mix Studios.
Yeah, this is In the Mix.
Yep.
Yeah, love this guy.
Yeah, so let's give him a shot here.
Welcome back to the channel. I've been testing some of the most popular audio interfaces for around £100 or less, and in this video I want to share with you my favorites, but also discuss the build, the recording and playback quality of each of the interfaces. So let's get right into it. Just as we get started, I want to say there's going to be quite a lot of information in this video, so please do use the chapters and timestamps at the bottom of the video to navigate if there's like a certain interface you want to know more about, or if you want to just hear about the recording or playback quality, please, navigate this guide so that it suits you best. I tested over a dozen interfaces, and of these I'm showcasing 6 on the channel. 4 are my favorites for around £100, and there's 2 which are a little bit cheaper at £70. Now, I bought all these interfaces myself. I'm not affiliated with or sponsored by any of the companies, just to keep it really fair, and I'll be giving away a lot of the interfaces after this video as well, so stay tuned to find out more. I want to quickly explain what an audio interface is for anyone that doesn't know, that's maybe a little bit confused, but skip ahead if you do know. So it's a device which helps you record and playback audio from your computer. It connects to your computer with a USB or Thunderbolt, which transfers the data, but also provides power to the interface and the microphones you might be plugging into it. The interface will have inputs for microphones, guitars, and maybe synthesizers, and it will also have some outputs for headphones and studio loudspeakers. They're all quite different in their design and build quality, but they all effectively achieve the same thing, and they help you listen to your music clearly and accurately so you can make good mix decisions, but it plays no part in the final export of your song. So it doesn't matter which one you have, your song will be exported through your computer, through the CPU, not through this if you're working in the box like the vast majority of us are. So don't worry about one of these changing the final quality of your rendered mix or master. Let's now take a closer look at my 4 favorites for around £100. The PreSonus Studio 24C, the Focusrite Solo 3rd Gen, the Audient Evo 4, and the Native Instruments Complete Audio 2. We'll start with some recording tests. I recorded into each of them using my Shure SM7B. Anyone who's used one of these knows that you need quite a lot of preamp gain to get a healthy signal out of them, and all 4 of these got a good level out of this, and we can take a listen to each of the recordings now.
So let's say you have to read an incredibly long email from your boss that you have to finish before the big meeting.
Listen to the noise and tone of this preamp. Listen to the noise and tone of this preamp. Listen to the noise and tone of this preamp. Listen to the noise and tone of this preamp. When I listen closely on my loudspeakers or headphones, I can't really hear too much of a difference that couldn't simply be explained by the fact that I didn't speak exactly the same each time. And while you may prefer one over another, it's clear that none of them were bad, and there's not one that sounds vastly superior to the others. So this meant that my review took a little bit longer to make than expected. I thought that maybe one would sound much better, that they'd have, quite different levels of background noise, but actually it turns out what really separates these interfaces is the build quality and the workflow, which we'll get to in just a moment. I want to talk about the outputs, so the headphone and loudspeaker outputs of each interface. They were super loud. When I tested with high ohm headphones, all of them provided a ridiculously high amount of gain. I couldn't go past 50 or 75% on any of the interfaces. And the loudspeaker outputs again were similarly hot. I couldn't go nearly past halfway before it was just frankly a dangerous listening level. But volume isn't everything, so how did they sound in terms of clarity, depth, width? To test this, I recorded the outputs from each interface into my mix pre using one of my studio masters. I captured the audio running out of it for a whole song, and then I lined them all up in my DAW, which I have here, and none of them quite retained exactly the same clarity, depth, and detail that the original master had, but they were all so close. Compared to each other, they all sounded almost identical, to the point that inverting one of the waveforms almost caused them to completely phase cancel and go to almost no audio at all. Really very impressed for this price range, to be honest. So the things that really separate these interfaces are the ease of use and the build quality and workflow, which is what we're really going to get into right now. I'll start with the PreSonus Studio 24C. This has an excellent build quality, and it was a full metal construction. On the front it has combination XLR mic and line inputs, which means you don't need to worry about what you plug into it, whether it's a guitar, the output from a synth, a microphone like a condenser or a dynamic. It's going to handle anything you put into that, and it's not going to break. You don't need to change any settings. I also thought the screen was excellent. It was the only interface I tested which gave me a good feedback as to the level of the microphones or guitars I plugged into it, or the actual mix that I was monitoring. Another part of the design I like is that there's a separate dial or knob for each control: preamp gain, the computer or input blend for direct monitoring. There's a separate control for the gain of your headphones and your studio monitors, which lots of the other interfaces in this price range don't have, and that's just an invaluable feature for me. All of the controls also feel really good. They're not wobbling, they're not going anywhere, and just generally, it's a full metal construction and it really inspires confidence. If we head round to the back, it's got these 1/4" outputs for your studio monitors and your headphones. I like my interfaces to have the inputs on the front and the outputs on the back, but this is a consideration for you. If you're plugging your headphone in and out all day, you might want the port to be on the front instead of the back. It also has MIDI inputs on the back, which is excellent if you're using some slightly older gear, and it's USB-C for the power and the data transfer, which is excellent. I really think that to be competitive, things need to be a USB-C or Thunderbolt. Now we're going to take a closer look at the Focusrite Solo 3rd Gen. It has a similarly excellent build quality for the money. All the controls feel good, but the inputs and outputs are slightly more limited. As you can see, there's one XLR here that isn't a combination, so you can't plug, say, a guitar into this, but you do have a guitar input over here on input number 2. So for your needs, this might actually be perfect. You might only be using one microphone or maybe an electric guitar, and that's all you need. The level and clipping indicators here around this halo that glows green or red, I thought those were great. They actually did help me set the gain. I was kind of surprised by them. I really like having an actual meter. I did much prefer having the screen on the PreSonus interface, but to be honest, this wasn't a lot of fuss. It was pretty simple. Just sort of turn it up until it's green and then you're good to go. On the front, there's also a control for monitoring. This changes the level of your headphones and loudspeakers. And the "and" is important because you can't control your headphone and loudspeaker volume independently, which for me just doesn't work. But again, if you're only using headphones or only speakers, this might not be a problem for you at all. On the back, it's similarly streamlined, just 2 line outputs for your left and right for the studio loudspeakers, and USB-C, which is great. I'm glad they've upgraded this to USB-C. It's more sort of forward thinking, it helps keep the latency really low, and I've found using Focusrite products for years that the USB-C versions have been a lot more stable on my PC than the old USB Type B connectors. Now we're going to take a look at the Native Instruments Complete Audio 2. Overall, the build and design is accurate and clean, but it's all plastic. But it doesn't slide off my desk when it's being, pulled by headphone cords or anything like that. It's just a shame that on the back it's still this USB Type B connector, which I think is a little bit dated, and if Native Instruments just upgraded that to a Type C, made it a little bit faster, I think this would honestly be incredibly competitive. Like the PreSonus, it has these combination inputs on the front, which I like, so you can plug anything into there, and as long as you choose line or instrument, it'll be good to go and there's not going to be a problem. I like that there's pretty much one control for everything. You don't have to switch modes. But here's a criticism I have of a lot of the interfaces. It's not just this one. This output control. Okay, let's take a close look. Hopefully I can actually get this camera to focus. So you might expect that this is the lowest volume or nothing. This is pretty low. And then this is the loudest possible volume you could tolerate before, maybe exploding your eardrums. But in reality, this is nothing. This is extremely quiet, and then here it's already unbearably loud. So you get this huge rotary dial here to control your volume, but in reality you only get to use a few degrees of it, just here to here. So I do like how smooth it is, it's just that it's not very useful. This dial, however, out of the box was not level, which I've sort of taken a video of. It's at a weird diagonal, and I don't know if that's a design feature, but given that everything else is squared off, I think that's just a little bit of quality control slipping there. But the reason I've included this is that I think that if they get a little bit of metal in this and they change that to a USB-C, I really think this could be a competitive interface. But right now it's maybe a little more expensive than it should be. And finally, let's look at the Audient Evo 4. From a technical perspective, this interface is great, the recording and playback quality, but I just can't get past the plastic at this sort of price point. I've got a little video here showing some of the build quality. This interface is completely different, suits an entirely different workflow because it doesn't have lots of little controls. It has one big dial here and then lots of buttons to choose what this does. But it didn't take that long to get used to the workflow. You pretty much have to select, which input you want to set the gain for, and then you can either set it manually or you can use the smart gain function. I really don't see a need for the smart gain function. I think it's so easy to just select an input and set the gain manually, especially when it's got a meter on it. But that might just be me. But one of my big criticisms of this, again, like the Focusrite, is that you can't use the headphones and the speakers at the same time or change their volume independently. It's sort of one or the other. But it does have all the inputs and outputs you'd expect, and these 2 combination XLR line mic inputs are excellent, and the outputs sounded brilliant. And longtime viewers of the channel know that I love Audient gear and I've supported them for a long time, so it's not a criticism of the company. They make fantastic gear. I just feel that this is potentially a little bit too expensive for what you get. I hope that taking a closer look at the build and design helps you maybe figure out what suits you or what doesn't, but there's another big factor to buying these interfaces, which is the software they come with. Pretty much all of them come with a light version of a DAW or 2, and then a bundle of plugins or like a suite of effects to help you get set up in this DAW. Just from having running this channel for so long, I've tried absolutely all of this software, and I think, based on what they're offering right now at the time of making this video, that the PreSonus and the Focusrite offer the most sort of compelling or competitive suite of software. But I know that a lot of these companies constantly change it, but I just think the plugins that come with the Focusrite are excellent, especially that Addictive Keys piano and some of the Softube plugins. They're just incredible stuff there. And the PreSonus coming with that light version of Studio One called Artist. I really like using Studio One, and I think of the DAWs that these come with, it's the most user-friendly and easiest to get set up with, even though it's not the DAW I use every day. I use FL Studio 20, of course, but that's my take on it. I think the software with the PreSonus and the Focusrite is the easiest for beginners and the most competitive at the time of making this video. Some people particularly want to know what my recommendation is or which I would choose, and of these it would be the PreSonus and the Focusrite. The PreSonus is the only one I would use every day in my studio because it has pretty much all the functionality I need, but I would also happily use the Focusrite one if I had a more streamlined setup, but it just doesn't have all of the inputs that I need in my studio. So now that we've got those 4 out of the way, I also said I would show you 2 for around £70, which I would recommend if you don't quite have the budget to stretch to 100. I do think as a general rule, you get what you pay for with audio equipment, and if you can, maybe try to buy one of these used instead of a cheaper one new. But the 2 that came out on top were one from Mackie and another one from PreSonus. There were so many in this category that I ruled out from many other manufacturers, so these are sort of the best of the rest. I tried stuff from Behringer, Steinberg, and a few others which I just completely wrote off because of so many issues they were giving me. But both of these unfortunately come with some compromises. So they're both the USB Type B, which is quite quickly becoming redundant, I'm finding, with a lot of audio equipment. Although, it works fine. I never really had much of a problem with it, but everything's going Type C, and I can see that being sort of the forward standard. A few more of the compromises include that this PreSonus one, for some reason, the output distorts the headphones and studio monitors unless I turn my PC's system audio down and then turn this up. This seems to distort at any volume, but I think for a beginner this would be absolutely infuriating, wondering why it was clipping. But the quality of the inputs and outputs was great on this one. And then the Mackie, while it didn't have any issues with clipping or distorting, the quality of the inputs and outputs I just felt wasn't quite up to the standard of the other ones. The build quality though, full metal again at this price, that's just fantastic. But when you're dealing with, professional audio, you're making music, maybe doing a bit of mixing, you really want to be able to hear everything in the highest quality that you possibly can. So although those are my sort of 2 favorites out of the rest of the bunch at the lower price point, I really think it's better to buy some used equipment if you don't quite have the budget yet, because a lot of these devices don't seem to really degrade or deteriorate over time. They tend to just sit on people's desks and get very light use. I've bought a lot of used equipment and almost none of it's, in fact, none of it's broken on me, and I just think it's a better way to go. You sort of get more for your money. Anyway, this video is getting a lot longer than I thought it would be, so I'm going to wrap it up here, but I do have a giveaway where I'm giving away some of these interfaces to people that need them because I'm done testing them out now. So check the description for more information on how to enter. If you need one of these interfaces or you know someone that needs one, please do enter that giveaway. And if you have any questions about these or the other ones I tested, please ask me in the comment section down below. I really like helping people figure out what's right for them in their setup, so please do feel free to ask me anything. Thank you very much for watching, and bye for now.
Definitely some good comparisons there. Important things to consider about what they come with, especially.
Yeah, he's really good at looking at the fine details on those interfaces. It's funny, by the end, the PreSonus would have been my choice too, based
Yeah.
on the features. I had considered that one back in February, and looking at his feature list as he was going through them, you really get a lot of bang for that buck on that. And with
Yeah,
that
sure.
one, you get Studio One is, their DAW that they push with that one, and you get a good deal if you upgrade it.
Yeah, the PreSonus would be the one that would stand out to me from the build standpoint. Again, I'm kind of biased because I use PreSonus gear on the bigger boards anyway. But just when you hear that,
And
like
flexibility.
and the
The
board
flexibility on the front. Yeah, on the inputs, you've got options on both channels. That's where the Scarlett, at least at this price range, falls behind it. I love the Scarletts. I recommend them constantly, but given the apples to apples here, the PreSonus does have that extra advantage.
Now with the Scarlett, that was the Scarlett Solo that he was talking about. Is there not a Scarlett Duo as well, or something that has a
Yes,
little bit more?
And that's the one I actually recommend the most, just
Right.
because the price difference is so minute that, like, if you think you might want to use an additional instrument while you sing, or have that extra flexibility of inputs, for the $20-$30 difference, the Duo really gives you a lot more bang for inputs. And go with the third generation. When it comes to those Scarletts, his emphasis on USB Type C is, that's how you buy something that's future proof. Uh, Type C is the future for USB, and it opens up the latency. It gives a lot faster of a signal, especially if you're using the MIDI along with the audio. That Type C is going to make a big difference in your latency.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with him coming down to those two. And again, the Scarlett also looks to have the same, a similar feel, slightly more even, not like an iPad, but more like an Apple product in terms of the overall way it's closed in, all solid one piece kind of thing, as opposed
Yeah.
to the Personas, which is the metal and the other parts, which is also solid. I mean, but they both would be, to me, they'd both be welcome on the desk. And this with the Scarlett,
Oh
I
yeah.
would probably go with the Duo over the Solo personally, but the either one would do
You
well.
know, the big one between the PreSonus and the Scarlett, the big one that would sell me on the PreSonus is the ability to dual monitor. When he mentioned, like, you can either listen to the headphones or go out the speakers, one or the other on the Focusrite,
Right.
that's a big deal.
Yeah, it is.
That's important. And again, the Lightning port, you have that benefit of, these will plug into phones also. So for those of you who want a multi-platform audio interface, these can hook to your phone just as well as to a PC. And for a lot of people, that's super important.
I also did like the I think for me the front panel, the way the Personas has the lights, like he was
Yeah,
saying, the indicators. I
I
mean,
like the LEDs.
the Scarlett does have the halos, which I would also probably like and get used to if I, had one. But with this,
Those are
I do
cool.
like having the meters.
Have you ever gotten to play with one of the Scarletts and their little halo, their light meter setup? It is cool. I do like it, but if I had to choose between that LED and the halo, I would choose this because it's more, makes more sense to me, like
Yeah.
he said.
And even just looking at the front here, I mean, it's just all very clean. You've got all the, might be to some people a lot of knobs to look at, but once you know what you're looking at, and it's just, you've got your inputs 1 and 2, you've got your levels for 1 and 2, you've got your outputs for the headphones or the mixer. Everything's pretty straightforward as far as what's what, and you can very clearly
Yeah, and
see what's going on.
they've surprisingly kept it simple. I mean, even though it does look like a lot of knobs, it's actually the bare minimum.
Yeah.
Those are the essential knobs.
And again, the solid quality of them, like you can really feel it, that the stuff is just, it's going to last. It's not the kind of thing that you're going to, bump accidentally one day and have things just falling off of it. I mean, it's a solid, like tank-like build, I would describe it as.
Yeah, and with those two, as far as the PreSonus and the Focusrite, how he was mentioning the headroom at 50%, these work awesome with your typical mics. You get a good signal, and you don't have to blast things in order to get it. Those both work great at like a nice 50% level, which gives you plenty of headroom when you do need to push.
Yeah. The back of the Scarlett does also seem a little almost too straightforward. It's just the power and the outputs.
Yeah.
So that also
Now the
is kind of,
Duo is a little better.
right.
That's another place where the Duo shines, because on the back you have two additional inputs that are, eighth inch, quarter-inch jacks, plus the outputs.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the Solo is a great introductory one, for someone who's looking to spend just $100 and get those Scarlett preamps and power a microphone, be able to go to a telephone or a computer. The Solo is like a great introductory interface for them. I
Yeah.
just think the Duo gives so much extra for just a little bit more. You spend 100 on the Solo, you can find the Duos between 129 to 149 if you really shop around. 159 seems to be the, like, average retail price, but for that extra $30-$40, you get some extra routing and inputs that make it worth it. It's better to just stretch the dollar at that point than go with the solo and then realize, oh, I do need some more inputs, and then have to go buy another one a year later.
Yeah. And then again, there are people whose situation is that they will literally never have more than, one instrument and one mic to plug in at any given time. And for them, the solo would be perfect, and that there's no reason for the expansion
Yeah.
in the future. And for them, it's just keeping, the desk cleaner, and, they don't need the extra options on the thing. So for them, it might make more sense to do it that way. But yeah, I agree that for me, it would be the personas, but
Yeah,
I could see the case for
if you're really sure, yeah, when you're really sure, like, this is all I'm gonna do, this is all I'm ever gonna do, then it's easy to make those decisions like this is good enough. When you're not so sure what you're gonna do, and you think that you might grow, and I might want to play guitar and sing at the same time, or I might want to send a track in while I'm playing guitar and singing. If you think that you might possibly need more, that's when you consider moving up.
Yep. And again, I think the other two that we looked at, or that he looked at
I really
in
do
here.
like on that PreSonus, I really like those dual inputs too. Those are
Yeah.
so useful. Like, they're flexible. Whether you plug in a mic or you plug in a guitar, those are great inputs. My Roland has those too. Very flexible.
Yep. Now
You
this is
just have to
the
be careful, because if you are using different things, guitars and things, sometimes with those kinds of plugs, you want to plug in gently, you want to unplug gently. You don't want to beat on it, because those plugs can get finicky.
Yeah. And on this one, this is the complete audio too. One of the other ones that he had mentioned in there that also has the combo jacks on the front. But if you look at these, the combo jacks themselves look about the same. The knobs look solid, but they're that little, it's more the plastic seaming for the case. And that big dial on the top is what he was talking about, having that, a large sweep range, but it's only really useful in that one little spot. So it's kind of not the most useful control. And I could just see where this would be a little bit more.
And that's the truth with big knobs. The bigger the knob, the less refined and accurate it is, because of the space that it's taking up in order to do the turning. I like small, precise knobs, and I especially like the ones that have, click as you go, so you
Yeah.
can really feel as you're moving up and down.
If you have a repeatable spot that you got to like click 7 or whatever, instead of just about there. Makes
Yeah.
sense.
And I also shy away from the plastic boxes. I mean, if nothing else, the reason why I've been so happy with the equipment I've been getting is that, Mackie and some of these guys, they stick to metal enclosures, and it just
Exactly.
feels more rugged, and they tend to be. They tend to be.
Yeah, because this this is the top, even the top view of the complete audio, and it is very straightforward. It's got the meter there, it's got the the big dial on it and all that, but it just, when you get to that last one that he did, the Audient Evo 4, that one was kind of just almost out before he even started with the way it's just the whole plastic box. Just didn't look, with the jacks on the
Yeah.
front, didn't look like it was going to be, that's almost like
Well,
a video game,
I
toy controller.
yeah, I feel like they wasted a lot of space here with that monster volume knob. Like, in design, there's a lot more you could have done there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, the features on these last two, they're generally there for considering their price, but considering they are competing against the PreSonus and the Focusrite in the same price category, they wouldn't be my choices, because they're missing some of those critical features, like simultaneous monitoring being a big one.
Mm-hmm. Very cool.
But I like how he analyzed each one, neutrally, and just basically said, the strong points and the weak points. He's
Yep.
really good and I like how he turned it into a giveaway like that.
Yeah.
That's a cool way to justify, like, getting this stuff, testing it out, and hey, I might not use this interface because I've got other ones. Let's hook somebody up with one.
Yeah. It's definitely a good way to do it. Now, I remember you and I had talked a couple times about the metal guitar mixing pull tech trick. It was one where you add a full tech EQ and you're basically boosting at 30 hertz. I remember we had talked about it at one point for guitar. I don't remember if we talked about it here or if it was just one of those nights we were just talking about other random stuff. But it was one
Yeah,
that
we
was
cover a
from
lot of stuff in the we cover a lot of stuff after the show, huh?
exactly. This was Spectre Sound Studios, which is Glenn was the guy on the videos there. I guess some people call him like the angry sound guy because
Oh
a lot
yeah,
of his
is he a
videos he's
Glenn with
kind of
two ends?
he's done with two ends, but he's sometimes just seems angry. But this is one of the ones where I don't think he's he's more explaining the stuff that he's working on or the way that he's using the EQs. But I like the fact that he goes over the concept of how to do it and an example of him doing it, as well as going over here's how he does it with his add-ons or his VSTs, but also here's how it sounds with the free versions that you can get yourself. And the one that he was talking about was I think the PT EQX is one that you can just go get yourself, which is basically a Pultec clone.
There's a ton of useful free VSTs out there that you could spend all your days just like going through free VSTs. There's so many and
Yeah.
so many useful ones.
Yep. I've seen a number of videos like, top 100 free VST, whatever's. And it's like, damn, that's a lot. Yeah. It's like, let's narrow it down to something useful.
And to go back to what he was reviewing there, that was one strong point on the Focusrite side because it's true. They give you a ton of killer plugins with those Focusrites. I know I've gotten them for Lou and gotten to see like everything but the kitchen sink for plugins.
Yep. I see we actually got a question from the audience over here from Quintessa in the chat. She was asking about a Scarlett and an SM58.
Quinn has one.
But what kind of question or kind of issues are you having? I'm sure how quickly the chat's keeping up. That's the one thing. There's a lot of times question will go by and it's like 10 minutes later, I'll see all of a sudden 4 or 5 chat messages all at once.
It's good that you're watching. Yeah, mine's not. I got to refresh mine. But yeah, those shores tend to be really cold, so the audio interface and the preamp that you're plugging them into, you really have to give them some boost to get a good signal.
Yep.
Especially those 58s.
Exactly.
But once you have that good signal and you find that good level for it, the Scarletts work awesome with those shores. That's actually a combination that over the last year, I've helped people to get those two particular pieces of equipment together. If they didn't go with the Scarlett bundles. Scarlett does have some great bundles where they do include mics with the interface, and again, it's just a little bit more. Instead of spending 129 on the Solo, 159, you get the interface plus a mic. In some cases, it comes with a mic stand or the cables. You should always look for bundles if you are going to get these, because a lot of times you can get a little bit more. You can get a lot more for a little bit more money.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a fan of doing bundles like that. Sometimes they try to mix in things that are, unnecessary or just thrown in just to throw them in. But a lot of times they do throw in things that are useful and do help out.
Well, the mics that they do in the Scarlett packages, they're generally good mics. But if you really know, like you want one of these Shores or you want a specific mic, then better to try to get a deal from like Sweetwater where it's like, hey, I'm gonna buy this and I'm gonna buy that. Can you? If you negotiate, places like that are sometimes you can save a lot of money. I spent like $7,500 back in 2008 when I bought all this equipment, but it was over $10,000 worth of equipment.
Yeah. And that's the thing is when you're buying big ticket items, they're more likely to throw in more of this or, hey, you need of that, and just, throw stuff in just to get the big sale, which is,
yeah, especially if they want to sell the $3,500 keyboard. I use that as my leverage to say like, and again, that first video when number 10, when he mentioned, just the extras like studio equipment, you'd be surprised how those little extras sometimes will change your music approach. When I got my studio desks and some of my sound reinforcement, that's when I started really taking my music serious. 'Cause now I have a dedicated desk designed for my keyboard, and everything is laid out, made to make music.
And you're basically checking things
And
right off that box of what you need to make a home studio. And like as you run out of things, left on that list to get, it's like, okay, well now I have the studio. Now let's do something with it. You start
yeah,
making music.
yeah, and studio desks is one that's like, for me, it was really fun to shop for, because unlike, a traditional work desk, um, you're you're looking at desks that are designed for housing your music equipment. So mine not only has a place for my keyboard, but it has rack mounts built in, behind it, which are so cool. Like I got all my racks right behind my keyboard, built into
Nice.
my desk. That
Yep.
$150 for this whole desk. I could have spent twice that just for a computer desk that wasn't designed for making music.
Yeah. And that's not to say, I mean, if what you had handy was a desk and a couple of 2x4s, you get the job done. You can always do it that way too. But yeah, it's definitely better when
Oh,
it really increases the workflow as well.
if you're good at building, I would love to actually build my own custom desk. My buddy Jay did that. He built himself a super desk, both for music and to actually house his computers in the desk. Like he built a computer case into the desk so he could just slide the motherboard in, and computer's actually part of the desk.
Nice. Because
And
all
he
the other
just
structural components are just dead
slides
weight.
it out. Yeah, yeah. He just slides out the motherboard in a tray. If he does need to work on it, slides it right back in, and it's
Hey,
computer
watch that
built
talking
into a
here. This is
desk.
supposed to be tech talk.
Well, technically it is.
We are actually coming up on 52 minutes, so I just want to let you know BandLab has the 1 hour streams, so we'll be up for a few more minutes. We will be going ahead, cutting, and coming back with part 2. Just to let you guys know. So take it away. Sorry to interrupt.
Thank you.
Sounds fair. Thank you.
Shh.
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 I got you first.
Shh. Got you last.
I have a whole bag of right here.
But those are good pieces of information for everybody on BandLab to soak in. If you're not sure what all the equipment necessary in order to get into home recording and things like that, that first video was a great introduction into all the elements and pieces that make up that home studio, and the audio interfaces that in the mix reviewed. um, Even at the bottom level, these are good starting places if you don't have any audio interface, or you're in that situation where you're using the phone at the moment and BandLab is filling up your phone and you want to grow. These interfaces can work on your phone, and as you grow, they're ready for anything that you're going to plug them into after.
And any of the familiarity that you gain from using the app on the phone translates when you go to the PC. You're doing the same stuff. You just have more screen to work with and more buttons,
Yeah.
more options to work with. But you're still your process flow is still there. So it's not like you're totally relearning everything from scratch. You're reapplying the knowledge that you've been using in a different way,
And your
which I like
sounds
as well.
your sound stays consistent, because whether you're plugging into the phone on these or you're plugging into the PC, those mic preamps, like the sound that you're getting with it over there, carries over to over there. So it's a nice way to migrate and not have to deal with like a sound change.
Yep. And definitely more options when you're not using the phone. I mean, the phone, I've seen the limitations myself. Where in the one studio, we really don't have a recording option down in the studio. Like you had an old board from way back when, but wasn't even recording to memory card. It was basically burning the CD directly. So I mean, this
Oh,
was
one
an
of those.
old. Yeah, it was an old
Yeah.
board. So like that's all we could get. So I can get studio recordings just from my phone into BandLab, and that was what I was doing for starters, just to have an idea, just to get something down as a starting point for making a BandLab track, and then maybe I'll
Yeah.
do my bass part over as a separate track, and then have it go to the next one and do that track, and be able to separate the layers that way. But he just went and got a new interface. He's the one that we just talked about with that Tascam
Yeah.
1608. So it's
Oh, I
got,
can't wait to see what he does with the Tascam.
yeah.
I mean, if the board he was dealing with was a CD burning board, I'm assuming it was FireWire, right? Because
No,
all
this
the
was old.
FireWires. Oh, it's
It
even
was old.
before. It's
This
even
was old
before
enough where it
Firewire, huh?
didn't have memory cards, so it was old enough where it was like CD was the way to get stuff out of it. So it was just
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was
CD
I would
was
call it old analog gear.
Yeah, yeah. My buddy Louis has one of those where it's one of the old Tascams. The way that you archived your mixes after you were done was to burn them to CD, which
Yep.
completely eliminated the mix. You know, it just basically rendered the whole mix.
Right. But that was the thing, is that's where you're basically bouncing down at that point, bouncing the whole mix down to just an output left right, so that you're listening to it on the CD. But you would also had the option to do it as a full backup from there, where it would have all the individual tracks
Oh,
just as
nice.
individual waves. But the problem was that he had figured out how to do it the one time, but he was, again, this was an older system, so like trying to look through the old manuals and trying to figure out exactly everything to get the songs that he had in it out was the main thing. We wanted to get everything out that was already saved in there, so that we weren't going to have a problem like burning out or overwriting what was in the memory. But
Yeah,
we did manage to get
yeah. A
some of
lot
that
of
there. But
times with
again, we
those
had to,
older boards, the interface and the way that you go through that process to burn a data CD versus an audio CD, if you don't remember the procedure, you do have to bust out the manual because it's not like straightforward, intuitive. You've got to go into menus and set things so that it burns a data CD.
we did have an update actually from the other day. I was over there 2 days ago, I guess, and we're trying to get that 1608 working. And part of the issue we had the first time was they had a PC set up down there, but no internet access for the PC. And it's an old Windows 7 PC, but
Oh,
no internet access, can't even get the
oh,
apps onto it. And
double jeopardy.
I'm like, oh,
Yeah,
wham, no good. But they actually had a like a Netgear extender upstairs, just with, be able something you just plug into the AC and then plug right into the Cat 5, and it's just Cat 6,
yeah.
and it's just the connection, it just goes. So we did that, and we were able to get it
Now,
to that. It was slow, but
how is the Windows 7 support? Because that's getting really hard for new audio equipment. Windows 7 is kind of getting to be a hindrance. Matter of fact, Cakewalk no longer works on Windows 7. So if you do plan on trying out Cakewalk, you need a 64-bit Windows 10 machine in order to keep using Cakewalk. It no
yeah,
longer works on Windows 7 or 32-bit.
we had just pulled down. They have Windows 7 and 32 and 64-bit, I believe it was. But when they we were able to pull it down, but
you can shoehorn Cakewalk into 64-bit Windows 7, but
yeah.
I've already tested it and tried it on a couple of machines. It's not what you want your production music machine. A little unstable, and in some cases, some things don't work.
Now, in this case, what we had at his studio, basically this would be the machine that's down there just to get the inputs. And then once it's in, then he can go bring it upstairs to the Windows 10 machine and work on it there. So it's just a matter of locations of like where the studio is and where the interface is, two different places. So this was the compromise, was getting a machine down here, with the 1608 to get it connected and work it from there. But we were literally in the process of pulling down Cakewalk at the end when we wrapped up the other day. And we almost got together again today, but he didn't ask me until the last minute, so I didn't get over there. But I'll see them tomorrow, so we'll get another update for next week.
Awesome! I can't wait to see what he does with that.
Yeah, because I mean, it is just so. I mean, 8 XLRs across the front, plus you could do another 8 quarter-inch inputs, so you could have 16 total inputs, as well as 8 quarter-inch outputs in the back, as well as phones on the front. It's got a lot of options, but the main thing is we got to get it all into the machine, because as of right now, even if we got everything all plugged into it, and if we don't have anywhere to get it recorded into as separate tracks, it wouldn't be benefiting us beyond what we already had anyway, because the whole main point was separating the tracks so that we have clean guitar track by itself, clean bass track by itself, clean keyboard tracks, getting everything on its own track so that we can mix things later.
Yeah, and then he should be good with that one.
Oh yeah,
that one can do it. So it's going to be interesting to see what he does with all that and all his toys. Like, he's got the equipment to plug into it.
Yeah, definitely. He's got guitars and amps. He's actually rearranged it all too. So like it's a whole wall basically of all of his guitar amps, and all of his guitar cabinets are all on this one wall. And the guitars are just all elsewhere. Like he just disappears in the back for a little while. It comes back out. He's like, oh, I'll play with this one today. And like grabs one of the other guitars, puts them in
It's
rotation.
nice to have those options.
It's nice usually the Les Paul.
Options, huh?
Usually the Les Paul, but sometimes he'll break out the others for a certain sound. I mean, if it's one of the options, I would take it too.
Start with the Les Paul. Start with the Les Paul if you got one.
Work your way out from there.
All right, so
Part
we'll get
1,
Ange to do the
Talkin
bounce.
Shhh I.T. So we're going to go ahead and say toodaloo for part 1. We will be right back with you. Thank you
Toodaloo
for
part 2.
sharing the fun. And join us in a moment for part 2.
See y'all soon.
And it's off. Why are
You know, I
Thursdays
wish
always so like slow?
you know, most people are partying on Thursdays, at least
Yeah,
in
they
the
get
old days.
paid. That's right.
You know, I wish I'd seen that review on that PreSonus back in February. I had seriously considered that one. I mean, I'm glad I got the Mackie, but I do still want to get one of those USB-C interfaces, and I think that's going to be the one. Not the 2-input one. I think I'm going to go for the 4. Because if you get the right package, you actually get a full-blown Studio One with it.
And actually, Glenn, you got some controls over there too. I took the waiting room down. Quintessa should be in soon. Get to with my queen. My queen Tessa.
Queen T.
My Q-win Tessa. My Q-win. Such a sweetheart.
Yeah, I have my iPad out for monitoring the comments. That's where I saw she was asking.
Yeah.
Yeah, my chat totally got hosed like halfway through my last message.
Well, Bullet was commenting a
from
lot
20
too
minutes
when
ago.
he was saying about how certain things didn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's got the 2nd generation though, so there's definitely some potential problems with that one. That's why they made the 3rd generation, because the one he has had a lot of complaints.
Q and I were talking earlier, and so like in the chat, I don't know if you've seen that quote that she wrote to me, but she's like, Angie, I read this quote the other day. The meaning of life is to find your gift, and the purpose of life is to give it away. And that was per like some of our conversation that we were having earlier. And I was telling her, you know, like certain things. So yeah, she felt that like she wanted to share that quote with me. Isn't that awesome? It's beautiful.
What I like is that one of the places I've seen that quote is on your quotes that you have rolling in front of the show.
I don't remember seeing that one there.
I remember.
And I
it from
put it
being
together.
I know. That's where I recognized it from. I was like, oh, that was cool.
That's
They
funny.
recognized it.
I would trust Glenn's memory.
Yeah, I'm gonna trust Glenn's memory.
I trust Glenn's memory. I trust his eyes. I trust his ears.
There you go. That's the way it works.
Big old 6'6" head.
It is like that's the way it works.
Brain in it.
I see this post from Doug Cowan an hour ago. This verification check saying, verification check, liked your post, verification check, commented on your post. Like there's somebody.
Oh, I
named
reported them the other
verification
day,
check.
and Band Lab took them down, and I guess they're
have
back
you
up
seen that
again.
account? Yeah,
But I'm
this
gonna
was
hang
from-
go live, guys. Okay.
Okay, yep. This is from an hour ago.
Yeah, that's the new scam.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's part 2 edition of Talking Shhh. Girl, don't spit all over me. IT with Tony and Glenn.
I need to get like a fan when she does that, and then like blow it at me really hard so I get like.
Oh, you got to use your Snapcam metal hair, because then you can do the hair blowing back.
Yes, I will make that effect. It's the Memorex effect.
Is it live or is it Memorex? I
No,
like those
it's
commercials.
Ange.
It's Ange with the shh, getting all in there. Now, the other question was, we were talking about the interfaces there, which is good. We were covering that. We were also talking about some music stuff earlier about different theory stuff. One was on modal mixture. We might want to hold off on that video for a little bit, but that was just one that was kind of cool, going back and forth between E major and E minor.
Yeah,
Stuff like that.
the last modal video that you showed me really has helped me to explore different approaches to key shifting and major minor shifting. That has been my jam going
Yeah,
back to the beginning.
nice.
That's one that like you really do want to get down.
Yep. And this is one where basically that's one of the things he's doing, but he does discuss it in the terms of you can do it as just major and minor, or you can also do it between any two modes of the scale. Like maybe not Locrian so much because it's not as useful, but you could go back and forth with, Mixolydian. You can go back and forth with major. You can go back and forth with minor. Any of the modes, you can mix them however you like, but just to toy around it. Like he goes back and forth in the exercise, takes a very simple example of a chord position back and forth between major and minor. And you can hear, where you're getting those pull back and forth. And he encourages you to experiment with other modes and just trying it out yourself, trying your ear, and seeing how things pull one way or the other, and how things resolve. And it is a good way to break out of a box, because too many times people get locked into a I know
Right.
minor pentatonic, and they get locked in that little box, and then it's hard to get out.
You feel your key and then you stay in it, and then you get into these loop riffs where it's like, how do I get out of this at this point?
Yep. And it can be tough. I mean, that's one of the things that makes improvising can be really tricky that way, where you're trying to break out of what you play all the time. But that's one where my cousin Jeff is one of my inspirations there, where just he can sound different all day, every day, forever, just with whatever he's doing, because he can just mix things around.
Jeff is
So
amazing at his ability to just go anywhere he wants.
Yeah.
He's so capable of shifting to a key and a scale that like he can literally go in any direction he wants at any given time.
One of my favorite
Very
exercises.
few musicians can do that fluidly like he does.
One of my favorite exercises with him is to call out basically a mashup of two different styles, or I'll be like, Hungarian reggae. And like, you'll think about it for a second, and then 2 seconds later, he's playing something that if you were walking by, you'd be like, that sounds like Hungarian, but it sounds like reggae. Why? How is that possible? It's just a mix of a scale and a feel. And he can just mash up any two things and just make it work, and you'll throw in, oh, this time I used this scale, and he's got the jazz influence in there as well. So for him, it's definitely one of those things that we got to get him on here to talk about some of these things and how he uses them. But a lot of them are based on the types of theory stuff that we're talking here.
I'd love to see him just jam.
Yep. I did catch a
And
little piece of
reggae
him playing
lends
guitar.
itself to mashing. If you're mashing multiple genres, reggae lends itself to mashing with just about anything.
Yeah.
Once you add that little bit of reggae beat or flair to something, you can really change the sound of another genre just by giving it that little Caribbean kind of beat behind it.
Yep.
Or if you singing wise, reggae lyrics and melodies have their own life to them.
And a lot of times, a lot of space in the groove, which makes a lot of room for everything else to kind of happen in there, and other styles to blend themselves in.
Yeah, you see why it works so well in like hip hop. That's one of the genres where I love reggae hip hop. There's a few artists that have really like put their signatures on that sound.
Yeah.
Hello,
I would be a fan of
hello.
that too. Hello.
Can y'all hear me?
We can hear you.
Hey, Quinn.
Hi. We're not live
How
right
you
now.
doing?
Are we on the show right now or no?
I think we are.
Yep, we are.
I think we
Oh,
are.
wait, you guys started the session? Okay, cool.
We started the second session now.
Yeah, you had that question on your Focusrite in the Shure 58, huh?
Yeah, I do. First off,
what are you getting with the 58 now, as far as signal goes?
First
how
off, I'm
happy are you
having
with it?
trouble even hearing you guys. I'm on my PC, right? I'm having trouble hearing you guys through Zoom because my sounds, like my windows is output is going through the Focusrite USB, and I have that hooked up, and the sound's turned up to 100, but I can barely hear you guys. And my Focusrite turned up to like 80. Any higher, it starts cracking. So,
How's your audio on the Windows side from the Windows mixer?
yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So I can barely hear the Zoom. I don't even have Cakewalk open right now.
One thing though is you mentioned that you're listening to it, so the headphones are hooked up to the Focusrite, not hooked up to the computer.
Yeah. Should
Gotcha.
I change that?
Because normally, yeah, for what we're talking about right now, we would probably want to have the headphones hooked up to the computer so that you're hearing us just directly through the computer output and not involving the Focusrite. Because what you're trying to do is use the Focusrite as a sound card to play the audio from the web page that you're watching.
Oh, okay, got it.
Where we want to just listen to that directly and then use the Focusrite separately for now.
Okay, let me replug this.
The
I'll
Eagle Eyes Glenn.
I'll mute you before I make any crackles here.
Oh, you sound good here.
Yep, yep.
But yeah, moving where you're monitoring from is the key when it comes to shifting between these audio interfaces and Zoom, and whether Zoom is using that audio interface.
Yeah, the important
That's
thing
why
is trying
Ange has like how many headphones now? Ange got a slew of them.
She's got the pink ones. She's got the other black ones. She's got the little tiny ones. She's got a bunch of
And
them.
she got a couple broken ones.
Oh, my green ones.
I was going to say the green
Oh,
ones.
yay. I can hear you guys now.
All right, there you go.
Much
See?
better.
Glenn knows.
Yeah, it just sounded like so it was kind of like it was kind of backwards, where it was kind of trying to use the interface, to push from the PC out rather than taking what we're trying to put into the interface into the computer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so I'll put the
That's
right.
why I love this Mackie. On
Sorry.
Mackie, I have a special button that actually shifts between those two modes. And when I hit that button, I can turn my Mackie into a sound card, and I hear everything that's coming from the computer. And if I press that button, it turns back into a mixer, and I hear everything going into the mixer. Very useful.
It's both very useful, and it can also be one of those points that gets people to think that their interface isn't working because they have everything's turned on, but they're not hearing anything, and it's just one toggle button that basically turned everything off on them. And I'm not against it. I mean, I definitely enjoy that feature as well, but it's one of those things that can trip people up.
We've dealt with it. Yeah, we've dealt with that trying to set, like Ryan had, I think, that problem with his Elysis, which we never ended up solving, but I do think that was the problem because he has one of those buttons on his mixer, and I think the stars were not aligned and the button was not pushed in the right place, and that's why he was not hearing what he needed to hear.
Yeah. So for the interface that you have there now, it's the headphones you're listening to are plugged to the computer, but the interface is connected USB, and the interface is powered up, so it's being recognized by the computer and all that, right?
Yeah. I got the drivers.
You've got the third gen, right?
I have the third gen.
Scarlett?
Yes, I do.
The 2x4?
It's just two or one.
The Duo? Oh, the Solo.
The Solo, yeah.
Yeah, the one we were just looking at. Yep.
Yeah, cool. Well, yeah. So, okay, right now for Windows, I have my input also coming from the Focusrite Scarlett. Should I keep that there?
That's fine for now. What we're listening to you through, is that from the computer microphone, or is that through your phone, or what are we hearing?
That's through the Focusrite and a mic, the SM58.
Okay, good.
That's into the Focusrite. Okay, sounds good.
Sounding nice and clean, and
Yep,
levels
sounds good.
are great.
Okay, great. All right, then I guess I'll start up Cakewalk. Let's see what you guys think. So my problem is that
what kind of signal? How's the wave
just
look when you are recording in Cakewalk with that?
Very low. So it's the same as if I have plugged it into my phone, and it's powered. Both my phone is powered, and of course the Focusrite, and yeah, the mic's going through the Focusrite. So they're all powered, and it doesn't need phantom power. So I don't know if it's just really low. You see my recording in the phantom song, right? I mean, I have gain on the Focusrite turned up to, I would say, like 90% up. Almost max.
Really on your input?
Yeah.
Your input's all the way at the end? Yeah, see, you
On
don't want to
Focusrite.
You don't want to have to push that input all the way up like that. You really want it somewheres where you have some headroom. 50 to 75 hopefully is a sweet spot.
And when
are you using the Air?
No, I'm not.
Use the
No, I'm not using
Because
that.
sometimes that'll give you a level boost. That's part of what it does.
Okay. Let me share my screen. Okay, can you see my screen?
Here we are. We see the camera.
Oh.
The shared screen though.
But you do see the shared screen or no?
Yeah. I see
You do.
Cakewalk.
Oh, you do?
Okay, cool. All right. Let's just put it in here. Doesn't really matter where to go. I'll put a new track. I'll just record over this one. This is actually my test track. So,
Yeah. So these are your mic tracks that you've done so far.
yeah, these two I was just testing. I don't even remember what I was testing, but like they're not
Yeah.
great.
The wave is a little thin. I mean, definitely you want it to be a little more. It looks like on 5 you're getting a little more signal. Did you bring the levels up?
On 5?
Track 5?
Honestly, I don't remember.
5 and 6 looks similar, if not the same left and right.
Oh, you know what? Yeah, I think they are duplicated and I just put some effects on it. I don't remember what I did.
Yeah, compared to track 3 versus track 5, I mean, the 3 and 4 look a little soft. I mean, vocals, you want a little bit bigger of a wave. Like 5 and 6 actually look kind of like weird.
They look okay.
Assuming that like these aren't like super loud parts. If they are, then it's still a little soft.
Right. Like this is the loudest part. Should I just play it or something? I don't know.
Yeah, sure.
I don't. I don't even remember what it sounds like. Oh my gosh.
Or you don't have to if you don't want to. The other thing is
Okay.
a compressor can also bring some of that up if it's too quiet.
Yeah.
Well, let's see if you can even hear anything.
Yeah, in the case of,
no, it's not even
in the
playing on my
case
side.
of 3 and 4, 3 is the dry track and 4 is the affected track over from BandLab.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's on solo right now.
Yeah.
I can't hear anything.
No.
Okay. This one here.
Yeah, I can see the level on the bottom. I don't hear it, but I see the level on the bottom of the track.
Yeah, I don't hear anything. I think my settings are wrong.
If you check your preferences, whether you're in ASO or Wasapi is going to be you have to go to Wasapi mode to share with Zoom. If you're in ASO mode, ASO will take control of your Focusrite and Cakewalk will own the Focusrite as long as you're in ASO mode. It should be under driver settings.
When I record, I saw somewhere that I should be in ASO. Doesn't matter.
It is the way to get the lowest.
Yes,
latency, yeah.
when you're done showing us, like here, if you want to share in Zoom, you want to switch to Wasapi during that time, and that way, like the sound will push to Zoom. When you're done and you go back to recording, always go back to ASO. You don't want to record in any other mode, and you don't want Wasapi exclusive because Wasapi exclusive is basically the same as ASO. Wasapi shared is the
okay, that's the one.
Is the Windows like sound API that allows for multiple programs to share the sound card.
I still don't hear anything.
Yeah, I don't hear anything.
Try stopping the share and then redoing the share and just make sure you're sharing audio. At this point, you should be good though in Wasapi.
Okay, so stop the screen share. Okay.
And you applied that, right? When you switched to Wasapi, you applied that?
I think so.
Great.
Let's try it again. Share sound. Click share sound. That helps. Stereo.
Yep.
All right.
I saw we just had a visitor a second ago. Jason popped through.
Yeah, I saw Jason. Let's see.
I see Jason all the time. He's in my dreams.
I do hear that. Yeah.
There we go. There we go.
I don't hear anything.
Oh, you don't?
We're hearing it.
We're hearing it.
Is it because my Windows output is still going to whatchamacallit?
It's how you're monitoring. Yeah. Where your headphones are plugged in.
Yeah. I'm
Because
plugged
right now
into
your
the
Windows-
laptop right now.
Your Windows is set to the Realtek, so if you want to hear it, you got to set it to the Focusrite.
The Focusrite? Okay, then I gotta like plug in my thingy. Say something.
Say something.
Something.
Something else.
Now it's going through my laptop speakers. Oh, it's probably a Zoom setting.
Really? It's going out your laptop speakers?
Yeah.
Because the focus rate
Yeah,
is
that's the thing to
probably
check too.
grabbed by Cakewalk.
Oh.
Well, it should be
But-
shared now. Cakewalk should not take priority over it. Cakewalk should share it at this point.
Well,
Wasabi shared.
We did change the mode within Cakewalk.
Okay.
but
So on
we shared it, but we
Zoom,
didn't. Okay.
on Zoom, I also have to change the speaker
Oh, there you go.
to Focusrite. So
Yes, on Zoom, your
Yay.
speaker needs to be set to the Focusrite.
Oh man,
There you
IT.
go.
This is why you guys have an IT show.
Exactly.
This
But
is
now
why I
can
have a
barely hear you
Glenn.
guys again.
This is why we have a Glenn.
And the volume's too low again, right? This way. But this way, can you hear if you're playing the track is the question.
Okay, let's see.
Yeah, see if you can hear the track.
Oh shit, what did I just do? Oh, I should turn that thing off. Okay. Oh, I can hear it now. Barely.
There we go.
So how's that for levels? Like it's hitting, I don't know, 18, minus 18, 12.
That's sounding good.
Yeah, it's pretty solid.
Okay.
Now, when it gets to that loud part, does it go red at all or does it stay green?
Oh yeah, I don't want to bombard you with that. It's not EQ'd. Or, I mean, it's not compressed.
Actually, can you go to that? I'd like to see what it does on the levels.
Okay. It's gonna be loud. Extremely loud.
Nice.
And,
No, it gets up there,
clipping.
but doesn't stay too loud too long though. That's good. We could bring that down
Yeah,
with
and
compression.
you're not
right?
clipping.
Yeah.
But
it's not
the overall
clipping.
question being, which way were things wired when you did that recording? Was it the way it is now, or did you have the headphones somewhere else?
Exactly the way it is now. So my headphones are plugged in Focusrite, which is the mic is also going to Focusrite. Both going to PC.
Yeah, that's not looking like a bad signal. Over on your end, do you hear any line noise from when you play it and you're listening to the silent parts? How's the noise ratio on the silent?
I don't hear
parts?
any noise. Yeah.
Then you're in good shape. I mean,
Yeah.
you can always keep pushing up your signal as long as you don't introduce like room noise and things like that. You can always push your signal further to get that wave a little fatter. I mean, that wave does have some room there, as long as it's not hitting the ceiling or the floor, you got plenty of room. And vocals typically should be in the middle there, 50% from the center, 50% on the bottom. If they really go too high up to the top, then you do have a hot mic, but yours is not a hot mic. Those shores tend to be cold.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm trying to get it to be a little hotter because I'm practically
Well,
I'm like about 2-3 inches from the mic and it's getting me a
test
lot
that
of
air.
low end.
When
Test
you
the
get
air.
to when you get to this point on your wave, try a second recording with the air on and see how much it boosts the wave, because the air will give it a little extra boost.
One other thing is
that's
the
part
fact
of
that
its feature.
we're listening through the Focusrite, whereas if we were listening through the PC, then we'd be hearing everything after the effects and all. So I'm wondering if we're better off getting, instead of having both the Zoom and Cakewalk outputting to the Focusrite and listening from there, if we change those both to output to the sound card on the laptop and listen through the laptop again, where you were hearing us clearly before. I'm wondering if you'll hear the vocal better there, because it might be that it's recording just fine, but what you're hearing is low because of the way you're monitoring it.
Okay.
So I'm thinking
how do I go about changing that?
You'd want to change the audio outs on your Cakewalk. When you go back to your preferences, the first one that comes up is where you establish like your output in the preference category. Yeah, the device is at the top.
Okay, I'm in devices.
This,
so output.
This is where you can, you would change those to the Realtek.
It won't let me.
it might not let you right now because you don't have the headphones plugged in, so it might not see the output plugged into the laptop.
And you actually have to uncheck the ones that are checked sometimes, And you also have a project
Aha.
open right now.
You're right.
Sometimes these won't let you do stuff while you're in a project, and
Okay.
while something's selected. Cakewalk doesn't let you use multiple devices at the same time. It's one thing that I wish they would, because I would love to be able to switch on the fly between different outputs, but you kind of have to do it one at a time. So as you can
Okay.
see, when you uncheck Focusrite, you could check the Realtek. So now Cakewalk will go out to your built-in sound card.
And then the question is about the Zoom also. We would have to be able to change the Zoom audio so that when she goes and physically
Yes.
plugs the headphones into the laptop, then the Zoom and the Cakewalk would both be talking to the headphones there.
Okay, so I go to the Zoom output to also Realtek.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying? Okay.
Yep.
Let's see.
So I think you'll have better results.
And it
with
is
the
good to
sound.
test across. Yeah, it's good. It's good to test across multiple sound devices to see that you're getting a consistent sound on all of them. To me, a computer sound card test is like doing a car test. You know, in the old days.
Mm-hmm. You're trying to test apples to apples to get things as similar as we can.
Okay,
Or see what
so
it sounds like on most people's. Most people are going to come out of Realtek.
yeah, this is my gaming laptop that I haven't touched in a while, but I can hear you guys now.
Hey,
loud
those
and
gaming
clear.
laptops have great sound.
Yep.
Yeah.
That was the important thing, because if you're struggling to hear before, then it could be that what you're hearing now, when you play this back, do you hear it and do we hear it? That's the other question.
Let's
Is Cakewalk
see.
now?
All right. Yeah, I can
I
hear
hear
it
that.
now. Yeah.
And you hear it louder or the same as before?
Well, louder. Overall, everything's louder. Definitely louder. So I'm gonna turn that down. Yeah, this is loud, but
Okay.
then, yeah.
And then if you were monitoring yourself, whether you're recording through the mic, now the microphone you're talking through is also through the Focusrite right now. Is that right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Yes. This is basically mimicking the setup that you're using already. So if you were to just go hit record on another track and sing the same way that you sang the other one, you would expect it to come out the same way as the one that you just recorded there, right? Because the levels are about the same.
Yeah. It's just that I'm like really close to the mic.
Right. And that was one of the things about the differences between mic types. Certain types you can be, in the room a few feet away and it'll pick you up just as clearly. Other ones you really have to be right on top of them. It depends which kind of a mic you have and how well it's picking you up. Things like the SM58s or 48s. This is what I'm using, SM48. If I back off, you'll hear me get quiet. Really
You
fast,
can get pretty close.
but I have to get really close up on it to really be clear.
You can get really close with those. Yeah.
Yeah,
And do you use a filter?
I don't have a pop filter, so I should probably get one because my plosives are getting. I mean, even if I'm this close, I have the pop filter in front of me. I guess that'll help a lot. Kind of.
One of the ways that it helps even is just
Well, the
to
pop
get a
filter helps
consistent
with
distance.
Yeah. If nothing else, it sets your distance.
Yeah.
But also that mic itself, does it have like foam on it? It looks like it might.
Yeah,
be
it has foam
covering,
on it.
That should do some to cut the.
Yeah,
that
helps too.
It does. Yeah, but like if I have the pop filter, then I'll be even farther, and it's like, it's hard. I mean, the waveform will be even smaller. Like.
Yeah, you'll bring it down a little bit more.
Another thing would be actually, rather than singing, like if you have the mic pointed directly at you, like it's going to shoot you in the face, that's one thing. If you kind of turn 45 degrees so that it's pointed right at the opening of your mouth, but you're blowing kind of past it. So the air, you know what I'm saying? Like the air you're blowing is not directly hitting the mic, but the sound is still right there. That's another way to handle that, is where you're not directly blowing into the mic or talking into the mic. You're talking kind of past the mic at an angle.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's one way you can stay close to it without plosives.
And you mentioned isolation, like you said you use your cupboard as a vocal room, right?
Yeah.
Because with this mic, if you can actually bounce back some of the sound, you might get some of that extra boost that you're looking for. Even a few pieces of soundboard around the mic will take the vocals that you're pushing at it and bounce them back, and you might get additional room signal just by kind of controlling the sound where it bounces.
Yeah.
Or if you're getting too much bounce back, instead of instead of boards that reflect the sound back, the other approach, if you're getting too much signal, is to get deadening foam so that like the sound goes in the mic and anything beyond it dies in the foam behind it and doesn't reverberate back. Both can be useful in different situations depending on what you're getting from your mic's recording.
One thing that might surprise
Gotcha.
you is you could even get reflections of the sound from your hands. Like if you were, not really close to the mic because you don't want to compress the sound all in there, but you could literally have your hands out on the sides of the mic and you'd get the sound bouncing off your hands also
Yeah.
into the sides of the
It,
mic. So that's one way to
Yeah.
test
it's
the
like going
reflections.
like that.
Exactly.
Right.
Like going like that, but just a little bit different.
Yeah.
The hand's a little bit wider and a little bit out, behind the mic, even trying to surround it. Depends what kind of a mic it is, again, because some mics are better with sound coming straight into them. Others are better capturing it from the front and the back. It depends what
Yeah,
type of mic.
those 58s are they're directional, aren't they? They're
Yeah,
not
usually straight in the front is what I'm usually going for
omni.
Yeah.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're directional.
Yeah, you and
Party
even in the
line.
front, you have a sweet spot. Like with those ones, I think it's like the bottom. You kind of want to do a recording and do that move around the mic as you give a consistent tone and move up and down and left and right around the mic, and you'll actually find that mics have a sweet spot, and in those, I think it's like if you come from the bottom up on it, you'll actually get a better signal out of it. You might be able to boost that waveform a little bit just by finding the angle.
Okay. Yeah, because I've been
And
coming
every
from the
mic's a little
top.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah, every mic's a little
I'll try
different
that.
there. So you really you'll figure it out if you're recording in the cakewalk and you do that movement test, and then you not only listen to the results, but you look at that waveform, and you can kind of see as you move around where the wave gets its strongest, biggest signal.
Got it. I will do that test. That sounds good.
Cool.
Cool. Thank you guys.
No problem.
Yeah,
Looks like a good setup though.
those
For you.
Shores, yeah, those Shores are awesome mics. So at least you're not fighting with something that isn't capable of getting what you want. It's just fine tuning it.
I guess so. I do sing soft and really loud, and I move around a lot. So I'm kind of like not liking this Shure. I feel like I used to have
Well,
a
with
Ready
your
that picked up
singing
everything.
style,
Yeah.
yeah, with your singing style, that might not be the most complimentary mic for that kind of like operatic and the highs.
Yeah.
You want you want as much dynamics as you can capture. So
Yeah.
those condensers, when you shop around for them, the ones with a wide field of range are going to get those really highs and those really lows, and that's what mics are for, is capturing all the field of sound that you want to. And there's no one
Yeah.
perfect mic. Some are good for this sound, some are good for that sound.
Yeah.
Shores
signal
tend
on
to
each
I'm
be
side.
good.
definitely.
The
Sorry.
Shores tend to be good overall. They
Yeah.
tend to cover everything balanced pretty well.
Yeah.
Those are
Yeah,
good
I'm
the signals?
definitely
point.
thinking of switching to something else, like a condenser. So I'll pick your brain about that some other time. I gotta go.
Cool. No problem.
Okay.
for
Thank you,
stopping by.
guys.
Time
Okay.
to
Thank
fly.
you.
Great to
Bye.
talk to you, Quinn.
Have a great show.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's definitely one of those things that'll.
Yeah, those 58s,
Mhm.
they're really popular. I mean, and they're versatile. There's a reason why so many people have them.
Yeah. And again, the main thing is getting the sound in there. And even if you saw like if the waveform seemed a little bit low at the beginning and then it was a little bit too loud at that other part, some of that can just be fixed with compression. The other part is it's really easy just to do volume automation, where you can just, you have the volume, come up to the, this point at the beginning to get it loud as you want it, and then just duck it right before that part where it got too loud. And you can manually change a lot of that to just automate it so that it's, more just putting the effects on and dealing with that, but you can have it crescendo and come back down like very easily that way.
Yeah, and given where the wave was on that, really a little bit of compression could actually just push it right up to exactly where you want it to.
Yeah, it sounded like the main issue was trying to listen to it back through the Focusrite for the monitoring. It was just not as much control over the volume output. So like if listening it through the computer and you're hearing everything very clearly, then that should already fix part of the problem, where she'll be able to hear herself more clearly and hear everything more clearly from there.
Yeah.
Good deal.
Yeah, and since she's using Cakewalk, I mean, I can think of like 3 different compressions in there that are right out of the box that will give her that like little extra boost.
Yep. Bring the tops off the highs and get those quiet parts back up. Sure.
Yeah, even just the basic Sonidus compressor has 2 presets in it that are really good at just popping up, 2 to 4 decibels higher, specifically for male and female vocals. That's the one I would try with that waveform where it's at. I would try popping that on the track and see if it, especially the way she sings, the female compressor on the Sonidus will likely put it right in the sweet spot.
And like you mentioned with the Airy, that just adds that little bit of sprinkles.
Close.
Gets that sprinkles on top.
Yeah, the Airy, anybody who does have those 3rd gen Focusrites should try the Airy. It is one of the cool features of that 3rd generation. And for those singers who are just looking for that extra sizzle, that extra kick, plus the feeling of an effect being there. It's not really so much an effect as it is just a boost, but it does add like it feels like it adds a little reverb, a little echo. It feels like it adds a little effect to it. And for a lot of singers, that's what they want to hear, is like there's something on their voice.
Yep, it does add that little something.
But it
does
doesn't
seem a little different.
Yeah, and it does it delicately. It doesn't just like drown it in effects. It just ups the EQ a little bit and ups the amplification a little bit and seems to give it a little bit of room and sizzle.
Yep. And that's an important one about using things in a subtle way, like a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Because I was at a gig a couple of weeks ago. Somebody, they had their own sound crew there. And when the song would come to a part that would, the vocal needed a little bit of delay, but they, put up way too much delay, like all of a sudden, and then like backed it off from there. And it was kind of, you could see what they're doing the right things. They were just doing them a little bit in a ham-handed way. Like it needed to be just a little bit more nuanced. It needed to be like, a little bit of delay and then back it off, or a little bit of this and then back it off. But they were just coming in too hot and then coming back off.
Delay is one of those effects that you want to be subtle with. Delays, reverbs, you want to be gentle touch as you implement them. If you just go shoving them in there hot and all the way up, even a good reverb sounds like crap when there's too much of it.
It's actually an important note just overall on any of the stuff that you're doing. Like a lot of times it's really easy to get down in the weeds, or really easy to get, you're working on your guitar track and you're working on the tone of it. And it's really easy to go down the rabbit hole of adding this and adding that and adding all kinds of layers of stuff. But it's important to just every once in a while, just, go back to the no effect and, like turn off the effect rack and just see what it sounded like originally and see how far you're straying from the original intent, because sometimes you can go too far down the effects rabbit hole and get away from what you really meant with the song in the first place.
I always ask why I'm adding an effect. I mean, anytime I'm adding an effect, the first thing I'm doing is asking myself, why? What am I trying to do with this effect?
Are you trying to correct something, or are you trying to enhance something, or are you trying to...
And I never use effects to correct something.
Exactly.
I hate to do that. That's like rule number 1 for me, as I was like trying to learn how to mix and everything, was don't use effects to try to cover things up. Don't use effects to try to fix something that is broken somewhere else. Effects aren't meant to do that. Effects are meant to sweeten a sound, to enhance it a little bit. Whichever ones you're using, hopefully you understand the purpose of it. Those compressors, when you use them, it is to give it a little boost or to level off wild sounds like drums that are splashing, and you use those compressors to stabilize something in the sound.
Yep. Exactly. And that's, and again, it's easy to go down where you're adding too much stuff, or you're adding, trying to correct it this way and correct it that way. You're trying to simplify things. Like you start from the basic signal and then try to, as basically or as simply as possible, fix the issues that you need to fix beforehand, and then enhance it with the different effects that you're putting on there. But like
Yeah.
that area effect, sprinkling a little bit, you'll notice a big difference.
And it's really not a good idea to get too carried away with too many effects on one track, because eventually, even if the first couple of effects did what you wanted them to do, if you keep adding more, let's see what this sounds if I add this, the more effects you add to something, the more they begin to clash with each other. And eventually you'll lose the fix that you did with the first couple of effects as you add more, and then you get lost in the effects, and you either lose track of what you're trying to do with that track, or you end up going back to square one and then turning them back on until you figure out which one's too much.
And it's particularly important with reverb, as you mentioned, just because if you had
Yes.
reverb on the individual track, and then if you had reverb on the guitar bus, and then you also had reverb on the main channel, I mean, you could end up with any of those fighting against each other if you're not doing it carefully. And I
And
know that you have
that's
very
a
specific ways
that's
you
a
go about
typical
reverb.
mistake. That's a very typical mistake and a very common one when it comes to people giving this track its reverb and then giving that track a reverb. And if they're all different reverbs, they will bounce off of each other. That's why I take the bus mixing approach. My reverbs, 99.9% of the time, my reverbs are going through buses centralized, so they're all using the same reverb as a glue. And I rarely add a distinct reverb to a distinct track. Once in a blue moon, I might have a track where it's like, oh, it's a horn track or a sax track, and I want to use a sax reverb. Once in a while, I might just add that specifically to that one track because it's the only brass sax track. But most times, my reverbs are all routed through a bus where you can actually control the amount of signal at the bus level.
That's important too, where you're sending the individual amount that you're sending of each track to that bus. You can send less or more, if you want the effect, because the effect, just because it's the same reverb across the whole thing, doesn't mean it has to sound the same on each track. Some can be more intensely pushed to
No,
it.
being able
versus
to
others.
adjust that signal. Yeah.
Yep.
Being able to adjust the signal that's going into that reverb means that my guitars don't have to pump a ton into that reverb because, guitars already got good signal and just want a smidge of reverb. And then other instruments, drum same way, gentle on the reverb. You don't want to go nuts with the drum reverb, otherwise those cymbals go crazy. And then, other instruments, give it more a 70-80% signal, and those can really fill out the reverb, while the main rhythms and the lower instruments just touch the reverb. They use the reverb for glue in those cases.
To sound like
You
they
hear
belong. Yeah.
that, yeah, you hear those drums in that room that you set up as the reverb, but you're not overwhelmed by the room's reverberating.
Yep. It's definitely key.
Yeah, and some instruments really don't need a lot of reverb. It gets a little trickier with vocals. Once you start mixing vocals on top of the instrument tracks, how I mix my vocals through reverb buses and the other effects that I bus, that's vocal mixing is a whole bigger bigger discussion.
Indeed.
Hey, Jake.
What's
happening,
up,
Jake?
guys?
How you doing?
What's up, champ?
What are you guys up to?
We're just talking IT.
I know, I saw it. I was actually chiming in down there. I don't know if
Nice.
you guys are seeing the chat.
It's kind of coming up
mine,
slow for me. So
Yeah, I got to refresh mine.
Let me refresh the camera really quickly
Basically,
here.
when I pause my video on my chats because I can't run that with my bandwidth, the chat eventually thumbs up when you're not playing the actual stream.
Right.
Yeah, it
Oh,
takes
I
about
definitely
15,
feel that.
20 minutes.
I see
Hey,
some
thanks
stuff there.
again. Thanks again for last night, man. You really did a great job.
Oh no,
Yep.
I appreciate all the support. I mean, without you guys supporting it, it really doesn't turn into much more than that either. My camera's being really weird right now. I'm gonna switch over to a different one. Oh, you're just
Which
gonna have to deal with me being close.
Which cameras do you use?
So I use a GoPro, a Razer Kaio, and then I use my Canon DSLR.
Oh, you got a Canon too, huh?
Yeah,
Nice.
about to be
You,
upgrading to a Black Magic actually.
you're a photographer, I take it then.
Videographer, videographer.
Uh, uh, Video and photography, because that thing's good for both. I would
I,
love to get one of those. My last camera was actually a film camera. I was a photographer back in the 90s, and I did have like 6, 7 grand of photography equipment, but all film before digital came along.
oh, nice. That's awesome. Yeah. No, what was I was trying to jump in there. So getting back to the technical speak, one of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
things that a lot of people miss on vocals, like 90% of the time you guys were talking about boosting and things like that. One of the most common mistakes that I see is people don't understand how to use EQ. They don't
Yeah.
understand what their frequency bands are actually used for and why you want to drop like everything out of your bottom end, drop everything you about to 125, and you want to boost your 15 to 20K, because that'll add that clarity and it'll do kind of an artificial but more natural boost to it at that
Yeah,
point.
it'll sharpen your words up.
Correct.
It'll sharpen up like your message when you
Exactly.
do it right.
And then using a proper gate,
Yeah.
limiters not so much anymore because of the way the condenser mics have moved now and the way that interfaces are working. You don't really have to worry about that nearly as much. You used to have to worry about putting a limiter on something when it was really analog,
Yeah, I was
because
gonna
you'd have
say in
a
the old
hot mic.
days,
Yeah.
super important in the old days. And now it's like, why do I need this?
With
Yep.
preamps and everything else, you don't. You still need gates, because if you don't have a perfect studio environment, like for instance, I do a lot of my recordings and there's jets flying over. No one ever hears them. No one ever knows that I live literally 3 miles from an Air Force base.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
got to be so drive you crazy as a musician.
It did, until I learned how to properly use gates, and so I learned how to set up my mics, and that's one of the most important things that people really need to start understanding, because this mic right here, this is not my normal vocal mic, but this is a Blue Spark Blackout. It's
Oh,
a
those blues are awesome.
This one is not. This is about $140 mic. It's designed for podcasting, basically just talking, not really designed for vocals. But almost every song that I put out on BandLab, not my other recordings. So my other recordings are all
Are you using
SM7Bs.
that?
That's what I'm using.
No shit.
Yeah, absolutely. And because I've got it dialed in so well for this setup that I have here. Now, when I go to my live studio, which is actually just a place that has a mixer and a few other things on it, I use an SM7B with a cloud lifter, because I just really appreciate that mic. The range and the things that I can do with that particular mic are absolutely fantastic. But yeah, this is what I use for my vocal mic at home when I'm just here goofing off in BandLab, putting something out. This is what I use. And
Now, that's USB, right?
no, this is actually
Or is
taken
it
through
the XLR?
It is XLR. It is taken through a Focusrite, a second gen 2i2, which is about to be upgraded to an 18i2 third gen. And then I'm also going to be adding a Claret
That's what our
preamp
boy
to mine.
Bullet uses.
Yeah, I'm going to be actually upgrading to the Claret preamp as well, the Octapre. I'm going to be running both, because there's benefits to having both of them. The third gen interface has that air mode on it, but the Claret has better preamps.
Yeah.
And so as far as being cost effective and what I want to do, that's where I'm going in that direction. And then I'm eventually going to add a Persona Studio Live 32S. That's where I'm going. And mostly because of the onboard compression and the analog emulation that they have on it. But going back to instruments, going back to recording, going back to these things, what a lot of people need to do is they really need to turn their volume down significantly. You want to really get, when I talk about on my show every once in a while, when I can do a live recording, when BandLab is actually cooperating with me, one of the best things to do is record low and then learn how to bring it up without clipping it. Learn that process.
Yeah.
Learn how to bring it up.
And I like that bottom up.
Yes. It gives you more
I like
headroom.
that bottom up approach.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so much easier to hear things if you start, like when I'm mixing, I always start with it turned down, and I bring the volume up to introduce my ears to the sound in the track. It's much easier to mix going from silence to noise than trying to go from noise to silence, because your brain reprograms itself. So if you hear something really loud, your brain starts to mess with your
Yeah.
ears and try to compensate, and you won't actually hear what you're hearing when it's loud. And as you bring it down, your brain is trying to compensate for the noise. You don't hear your mix properly. But if you go
Correct.
from silence up, you'll hear as something comes in.
So Quintessa's asking, since we're talking mics, what would we recommend for a condenser mic? I actually would never recommend a condenser mic to someone who doesn't know how to use one, ever. What I would recommend is I would highly recommend going the Shure SM7B route, because that's a dynamic mic. It's a dynamic mic. That's what it is. But you can use it through an interface. You can use it through a cloud lifter. It's probably a very popular choice. I would never, ever, ever.
Yeah, on the singing side.
Yeah, it's the best. It's the best entry level mic for a home studio that you can buy. Yes, you're going to spend around $500 on the entire kit, but that's low, considering, the Manly reference, which is my dream mic, is, close to $4,000 before the power supply and preamp that you have to have with it. Just the mic itself.
Yeah.
Most Neumanns run anywhere from, 18 to 3,200. And, when you're starting to look at the what is divined as the standard, those are the ones that are out there. So I would never, Quintessa, I would just say I would never, ever, 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 ever recommend to someone who doesn't have studio experience or a studio environment. I would never recommend to go a condenser mic. You won't get anything out of it. Go dynamic. You'd be better off running a 58.
And an important question there is whether you're talking about a mic that you might use in most.
Losing you there, Tony.
Yeah, he's breaking up a bit.
Yeah, I think he just dropped out.
I think she is currently using a 58. So that
is currently using.
Yeah, so if you're 58 on a Scarlett.
So if you're using a 58 on a Scarlett, that's actually a really good setup. It actually is a really good setup. What I would recommend is learn how to make that mic sound good. Learn those little tweaks. Learn those things that you want to do, because a dynamic mic for recording is actually really amazing. Especially, like I said, for the newbie to home recording and things like that. The enthusiast, it's going to start going towards condenser mics and things like that. And they're going to start really mastering what sound they're after. There's different mics for different things. There's different types of mics from the same company. Shure puts out how many mics, and they've got, the variety is absolutely insane. And some of them are strictly drum mics. That's all they're good for. Then you've got brands like Telefunken who have stereo mics. Learning how to use a stereo mic setup is totally different. And
oh, no kidding. I would like to play with some of those stereo mics. Yeah.
One of the aspects that she was mentioning was the that she moves around a good bit when she sings. And that was one where with the 58, for example, you really do have to be kind of in that sweet spot in order to keep the volume consistent. So something for her is a consideration would be moving around.
Well, that's almost with any mic though. I mean, you get a large diaphragm cardioid mic on Omni, and it's going to sound different depending on what your position in the room is. And so one of the things about recording that
but would you really want an Omni though? Would you really want an Omni for a vocal mic? I mean, that would not be my choice.
I would never use an Omni, but what I'm saying is in those situations, if you don't know how to set it up, then it's going to really change things. Vocal discipline, like if you watch somebody, like if there's a great scene from the movie Bohemian Rhapsody, and it's overlooked.
I just watched it.
So you probably know what scene I'm talking about, to where it shows him singing in the studio, and it shows him in this very upright and rigid motion when he's singing it. He's singing a very specific way when he's recording, but Freddie Mercury was everywhere. In the grand scheme of things, when he was moving around, he was doing all sorts of crazy stuff. But in the studio, he was right here. He was in this area. That's part of that's, once again, that's vocal discipline, and it takes work. It takes a lot of work.
And that's why you see studios like, even for those who aren't used to doing it that way, when they do go into the studio, the studio's designed to take even a newbie singer and make them follow their rules. The pop
Yeah.
filter's there to make sure they don't eat the mic. You notice, like, you always see these studio musicians like holding their headphones as they're
Yeah.
singing this way because the engineer is making them open their vocal cords, even
Correct.
if they don't
They're
typically
up
do
high,
it.
their
The
chins
engineer's
up.
making them do
Oh
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, their chins up high generally. They put that mic a little bit higher than what's comfortable usually. They make you reach for it because then you're using your diaphragm, you're pushing up with it. And then on top of that, a lot of studios now are moving to a half moon type screen,
Yeah.
noise filters.
Oh,
They're
yeah.
using those.
Seeing that everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a lot of studios are moving that because what it does is it forces you into this one particular spot. Even though you're in this beautifully, sound dampened, acoustically perfect studio.
But they're trying to control that sound to a precision level.
Exactly.
That, yeah. See,
So,
I
yeah.
love that. This is like the next generation of, at this point, we've dealt with digital long enough now that you're starting to see the sound engineer tricks that, like, now they're really getting in their groove. The early 2000s up till like 10 years ago, a lot of digital sound engineers were just trying to figure out, like, what the hell is this shit? Because everything changed overnight. Now we're kind of getting in that comfort zone, and you're really starting to see advanced tricks and sound reinforcement like that.
Correct.
And it's with digital, it's not all on the computer side. Like those little analog techniques, it's about the signal, the capture. That's still just as important as all these cool digital tools that we play with.
Right. But I mean, you gotta remember that what we're learning in digital too, a lot of that's being passed down right now. A lot of that's being passed down from, some of the pioneers in that were like, let's say Alan Parsons was probably the first to really start into digital. I think he's the first to start into digital. He was an analog guy, but he started making.
And he was just as he was just as advanced in the analog world. I mean, he was always ahead of the game.
Then you had legends like Eddie Kramer that were like super pushed the boundaries. I mean, when I talk about push boundaries of sound engineering, he did things with analog that wasn't supposed to be possible. Yeah. He recorded for David Bowie, the Rolling Stones, Eric Clapton, so many different sounds. You got Joe Barresi, who basically molded the digital scene with people like Trent Reznor, Queens of the Stone Age, that digital era coming out of the grunge rock area and moving into actual digital recording. And so,
back then, your digital still felt analog. I mean, ADATs we're still tape. Like it still felt like it was analog, except you were starting to get a digital signal.
Yeah,
but
I mean,
it was a lot of work, and the conversion. Think about it. They didn't have all these cleanup tools that nowadays we take for granted. You can clean things up digitally now so fast. Back then, you had to roll your own.
Well, the other thing that we're seeing too is we're seeing less jack of all trades in as far as studio engineers. Yeah. We're seeing studio engineers that are specializing in vocals. Then we're seeing people like Chris Lord-Alge who are coming up and saying, "Hey, I'm good at vocals, but where I'm going to really shine is on guitars, and that's where I'm going to focus." And he mixes for the Muse, and there's a completely different engineer that does the vocals for the Muse. Even though he's the lead engineer, but he's got another guy that's doing the vocals on it now. He doesn't even mess with the vocals. All he does is strictly guitars.
It makes sense.
Yeah. And so
when you look at like your toys now, it takes a different kind of expert to go mixing up a rack for a guitar with digital that's mixing up a different experts don't have any clue about what goes on in that other effects field.
No. And that's okay. And it's perfectly fine. And so like to people like Quintessa that are asking questions like that, I would absolutely say that start at the bottom. Really watch videos. Don't go and waste money buying new things because new things won't always help you. One of the easiest rabbit holes to go down is probably the plugins rabbit hole.
Yeah.
It's really easy to fall. I think we were all talking about this actually.
Yep.
About how falling into that route hole and buying. I have all these plugins that I don't even use. I'm sitting here like, I don't even
There's
use these.
thousands of free ones. You could spend all your days just finding free ones to try out. And
Learn how to
even those, you'll only find an occasional needle in a haystack.
the things you need to learn to master right off the start. I would say a 30 band EQ, one of the most important tools that you will ever learn in mixing your own stuff.
You can do a 30 band. I'm still wrapping my head around the 5 and 7s.
We used to call that one we used to call that the Uncle Al EQ, because up at the mountain, there's one guy, Uncle Al would bring that in. You'd hear a feedback, and he would just reach over, know exactly which one, just pull it right down, and the feedback just disappears on you, and you don't hear any other adjustment because it's such a narrow little cut.
Correct, and that's why I would focus on learning that tool, because it's so dynamic. There's so many things that you can do with it. A 30 band EQ, if you can master using a 30 band EQ, you are going to be in a completely different world of music. The next thing I would master,
complete precision.
Complete
with a 30 band, it's complete precision across the frequency board.
Yes. Now it's difficult, but if you're gonna, like, one thing that a lot of people do is they get comfortable with like a 5 band. They get comfortable in it, and they're like, oh, I can just do this.
It's a good way to start. I mean, just to understand EQ. Like basics. I'm not a great EQer. I'm still trying to understand frequencies and what fits into which frequencies. Once you get comfortable with the 5s and the 7s, then you want to like focus in on a micro part.
Imagine what you would have been like if you would have started with a 30.
I have a hard time with EQing.
Imagine where you'd be though if you would have started with a 30.
It's great ear training.
I might actually know how to EQ.
Bands are.
And that's why I say start with a 30. Learn a 30. Like if you can learn a 30, you're going to be in a whole different world, and you won't get used to those almost shortcuts in a 5 and a 7 band. They're almost a shortcut. And because you're like, oh, I'm just going to drop this entire range of frequency really quickly. And sometimes the 7 band works perfectly for that. And when I'm recording someone else, I can generally pick out what I'm going to use. Like, oh, I only need a 7. This guy's got this much of a range. I don't need a buzz off a 30. It doesn't even make sense.
Yeah.
Graphical EQ, totally different world, Contessa. That is something that you have to. Great question, by the way. I would say start with a 30 band. I would say start with a standard 30 band analog type setup and learn your frequencies, because as you learn those frequencies, you're going to learn a lot more. The graphical EQ is it will confuse you. It will really mess you up. What I use a graphical EQ more for than anything is volume leveling. I use a graphical a lot on that because it's a visual representation of where my volume's at across the song.
Yeah, it makes more sense in that volume adjusting way. With vocals, I mean, nowadays you have so many like visual options. It's beautiful.
It's really pretty.
You basically are looking at colors and lines, and you start drawing a shape almost.
It's beautiful. But if you don't understand the basics of EQ, you're not doing anything but making things look pretty in a visual way. You may be completely screwing up your sound.
One big thing with the with the 30 band or with one of the larger EQs there, being able to get to all those different ranges, one way to work your ear or figure out what you're working with is to bring all the levels all the way down and then just pick one band and just bring that one band up while you have a reference track playing in the background, and you just bring that one band up and you see what part of that track is bleeding through at that particular frequency range, and then bring it down and then bring up one nearby so you can see, oh, the snare is right in this one.
And
something else.
A good reference track is key there. A good reference track is key there. You don't want to just slap any track in there. You want one that will help you to hear those different frequencies that you're trying to explore.
Correct. And another thing that's very underused and not done a lot, and I don't see a lot of engineers do it. So the best engineers do this. One of the things that some of the greatest engineers in the world of music do is they will completely remove an effect, go way high on that effect to hear it, go all the way back down, and then bring it to that level that they want.
Yep.
Training your ear to hear that effect, training that, just going all the way up, going, oh, that's what that does. Take it all the way out and go, this is how it changes it.
One of the things that I'm constantly, when I'm showing people Cakewalk and showing them how to add effects and try them out and listen to the presets, I'm constantly finding myself telling them to solo a track and listen to the effect on a solo track and the effect it has, say, on this vocal. Stop trying to listen to how it sounds with all the music and all the mix as you're trying to like get familiar with a new effect.
On effects wise, yeah, but as far as mixing wise, there's two different schools of thought on it. One of the things is, and this is, I don't think either one is wrong. There's one school that says make sure you're
Hold that
mixing with
thought.
your.
We are about
Oh,
1
wow.
hour into the show, and we know how
She's gonna do a
Band Lab
bounce.
likes to go ahead and say, bounce, rabbit, bounce. So, we will be going ahead, disconnecting
What
and
is this
reconnecting
voice?
for part 3.
What is
So,
this voice?
we will then go ahead and continue. Talking Shhh I.T with Tony and Glenn and special guest Jake Zeke. Stay tuned. We will be right back with you.
I love
Great,
you,
ain't
Edge. That voice is incredible.
Thank you.
I hope I'm not barging in and taking over, guys. That's not what my intent
No,
was.
no.
I just
no,
saw that
are
you
you
were talking.
kidding?
We love
This
the
is
guest.
fantastic.
Great to have you.
I was like,
You
I
are a
know
man of
this.
knowledge,
Come on
Jake.
in.
Actually, I saw it pop up that you were in the waiting room, and she actually let you in before I could get to it to let you in.
Yeah. I was like, this
No,
is my
you are
jam. What you're talking about right now
always
is like
welcome.
my jam.
Yeah,
Fuck
there were
yeah,
60
man.
people watching on that stream.
Nice.
So it's building.
And very useful information. I mean, this is the shit that I get asked all the time. In some cases, I don't have the right answers. I don't have the answers, and I say, you know.
But we do
I mean,
know how we would
sometimes-
approach. We do know how we would approach troubleshooting the answer, and that's where a lot of times it's the approach that helps. Where some people they have a problem and they just hey, I can't get whatever to work, and it's like whether I know the answer or not, I know what I would try, and it's like, well, we could try this, we could try that, we could do this, we could try that. Try to simplify the situation down.
And also
No,
understanding.
and that's
the
why it's nice
differences, too.
here because they have a feeling like they have somebody to go ask now to get an answer. And you guys are great ones for them to come and ask.
I'll tell you, if I was going to ask anybody about live sound, though, I'd be asking Glenn. Like live sound,
yeah, me
there's
too.
a different art to that, and I
There is,
do
for
it.
sure.
I do it,
Not just,
but
not
I
just
don't do it to
sound,
the level that you
lights.
do.
Lights,
I'm-
man.
For me, I'm
Not
more
just sound.
I'm seeing more what my buddy Mike does. Like I'm seeing a window into his world of how he mixes sound, and he's like next level with the stuff compared to me. Like me, I get how to hook it all up and all that. He has all the equipment. He knows, like start to finish. Like he could just show up and run a festival and
Right.
pack
Hey,
it all back into his
Glenn.
Jeep by himself and get out of there. Yeah,
How about sound Bill?
Bill Day, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got a
He
great
is-
studio in his basement too.
He's actually known for being like the biggest open mic guru here in my area.
So let's see. We did now the open mic at the match. That wasn't Bill's, right? That was somebody else. trying to think of the last open mic.
That
I did
was
with, Bill.
John Canava usually has one there.
What board
But
is Bill
you
using
goes to a couple.
on those?
At
When
one
he,
point, he was using an older Behringer that he had.
yeah, I'm surprised he's using that
There's
on
a-
the road.
Actually, there's a lot of people that moved over to the X32 when it came out, and there's been like 6 variations of that since it's come out. There's people that just have stuck with it. The X32 is
X32
probably
is
one of the
sexy.
greatest licenses.
Hell yeah, that is a sexy board.
They're usually using some
Don't talk
rendition
about
of
my
it.
mama like that.
Personas was kind of late to the party on that end.
I'm gonna hit
But-
the go live here.
The
So
I think Personas has the popular choice though.
They have
In
the
the end.
best. They have the best
Yeah,
home studio mixer right now. Period.
Yeah,
the most desirable.
Are we back?
I am a fan.
Are we like official back?
I think we're just getting started. We're getting the new key.
New key.
That should say when it turns on.
Meeting is now streaming
I really
live
hope
on
they do
custom live
something.
streaming service.
I love when that happens.
Oh, you guys, like I said, you were just talking my jam, and I was like, as far as like
are
making.
going live,
There we go.
live, live. We are going live.
Going for the live looper.
She's trying to make it loop. That's what she's
Live
doing
looper,
right now. She's
looper.
purposely trying to make it loop.
Say what? We are talking shh, shh, and another bag of shh, like Glenn said earlier, IT with Tony and Glenn and special guest Jake Zeke. Take it away, boys. Have a great
Oh, and we're
show.
back again.
Why, thank you.
We got a special. We got a king size bag for Jake tonight.
I know. I really what I appreciate about this portion of this particular show. What I appreciate this is that one of the things that a lot of people get confused on, we saw that in the chat, is they get way ahead of themselves. Way ahead. They're like, oh,
Yeah,
you know what?
Carriage before horse all the time.
Yeah, they're like, oh, like, I need to get a new condenser mic. Well, no, like you're
Why?
probably using the best mic
Ask
for you.
why.
Right now. Like,
ask why.
Yeah.
Answer why.
So what if, you know, if so-and-so is using one, do you know how to use it? Do you know what the difference between Omni and Direct is? Do you know the difference? Yeah, I mean, there's things to really take into account with it. Why are you buying that mic? Maybe you actually want to buy a studio pair. Maybe that's what you actually want to move into because that fits your vocals better. But I would say that the best mic to start with, always in a discussion, no matter what, start with a nice dynamic mic. Go with like a Shure 58. SM7B is probably the classiest and the one that I would recommend to anyone. It's a little bit more on the budget end, but it's going to bring you closer to that studio level.
And
see, and that answers the first question you should ask is, what are you trying to do? Correct. That answers the what, and then the equipment that you choose should answer the why to that what.
The SM58 is a great choice for other reasons as well. Like just we were talking about live sound as well, and that's one of those where the 58s are just always in the bag because at any particular gig, if somebody needs a mic, just grab a 58 from the bag and throw it in. They're good,
and it works.
And they're rock solid. Like they last forever, and you can actually beat on them pretty good.
I mean, there's a reason that Shure is the industry standard. There's a reason for that. They modeled the perfect mic. You got to start getting to, like the Super 55s. That's a completely different level that people completely forget about with Shure. That was their model. They perfected the most classic mic in the world. They perfected it, and it is the go-to. I mean, look at some of the biggest names in music that use them live. Dave Grohl, Foo Fighters, 55 all the way. Mm-hmm. The rest of the band uses 58s. Like I can almost guarantee you that every single live performance that you see, 99% of them are using a version of the Shure 58, whether it's a wireless version or a wired version of it. That's what they're using.
Yep.
You got to think about that. And they sound great. Why do they sound great? Why? Why do they sound good? And why are you can't?
Have you ever dealt with the wireless versions?
Oh yeah.
Have you ever got to compare the wireless version? How did you feel about was there a sound difference?
So there's this thing going around right now where I'm seeing a lot of facilities and a lot of smaller venues like trying to go cheap, and they'll go with these 4-band wireless mics, and like, wow, that sounds so awful. They sound really tinny. They're really prone to feedback. They have an issue on them. Well, I had an opportunity.
Yeah, that's what I always notice.
Yeah. Well, I had an opportunity to go and actually, so one of my side gigs that I do, so I drive a big hauler truck. It's a main job. But one of my side gigs is I actually set up major sound venues, major. Like I did the doTERRA Essential Oils event, and they have a huge stage. Did Stadium of Fire, which is an incredible event here in Utah, where they have this live fireworks show and music. I'm going to be setting up for Metallica when they're here on their next tour. I'm already booked for that. And basically I build and create these audio places, right? And I don't actually engineer them.
You get to play with some toys.
I get to play with stuff.
You get to toys, yeah.
But
awesome.
It was my first experience with a truly, multi-million-dollar setup. And I don't say that lightly. It's literally multi-million-dollar setups that are out here. And I noticed, I was like, they're using you know, they're using a Shure system. Their entire wireless system is Shure. Every single bit of it. And they run in-ears through a Shure system. Now, the in-ears are different. Some people use like their actual monitors themselves are different, but it's all through a Shure system. It's because it's tried, it's true, it works, it's
And that's all RF,
compatible.
right? It's all radio.
Yeah.
Every bit of it.
Yeah.
And it's compatible. That's the other thing that a lot of people don't realize is what Shure has done is they have made their stuff compatible with everything. Like you can buy something that's Shure and it'll just plug into what you already have.
And that's the key to making a standard.
Yeah.
Any company that wants to make a standard, that's how they do it, by making it like open-ended for everybody.
Yeah.
Otherwise, nobody's going to follow your lead.
Exactly. And so what I would say is that yes, the wireless version of the Shure 58 system is absolutely just the same. It's not any better.
That's awesome. It's awesome that they've gotten there, because that was not the case even 10 years ago. Wireless versus wired in performance was a decision.
Correct.
A big
you've also got dedicated, you know, RF signals now, which is very different than what you had before.
Yeah.
And so you've got very, very precise frequencies that are on these mics and they're dialed into a very specific spot. And so on the professional side, like I've seen two systems that I've seen used and I've questioned both of them. One of them is this mic is specifically tied to this frequency period. You can't change it. You can't do anything about it. That mic is tied to that transceiver. That mic is tied to that receiver. End of discussion. It's a one-way street. No other mic will work.
And that's how they keep things from stepping on each other's toes accidentally. Yeah.
But then they have another system at the same time that's variable. And so they run both. And so I haven't experienced it enough to really kind of get into that side of it, but I do know that signaling has come a long way.
Oh yeah.
One of the other big things.
Now, have you noticed
Ooh, Glenn's got something. Glenn's got something. What was that?
Usage for wireless, where you know, with the wireless mics, you give somebody a wireless mic, and the first thing they want to do is go walk out in front of the crowd. And walking out in front of the mains is a bad idea. So it's like you gotta know what you're doing. I mean, the wireless mic is great. It's discipline. I mean, if it's just wireless and it's just there and it's just one less thing to trip on, that's great. But if you're using it because you plan to go travel, understand how that microphone interacts with all the speakers that are around you if you're going to go wandering.
Understand that you're right in front of the monitor and you drop your mic to your side.
Yep.
But then you've got.
I see the guys do this all the time.
I've always thought that the best use of wireless is to avoid like tripping all over shit on the stage. In its simplest, it's really just to be able to move around on the stage without running across a cable that you don't need to have.
But also something that's come in that's very new to the scene in wireless, specifically the Shure system, is that it does have an anti-feedback. It actually does. It has a system that recognizes feedback, that is able to say, oh no, this is bad, cut that out.
Yeah, stop giving me that signal.
AI, huh?
And so it's actually awesome. Really impressive. And it's on like, I want to say it's like a 3 millisecond delay. It's something insane. And so you can literally get feedback. The mic cuts that feedback, makes sure that you never hear it. And then you can come back to start singing and it never skips a beat. Like it's incredible.
Isn't it amazing? It's amazing that they've incorporated, and it makes sense too, because it's not hard to detect it like algorithmically, and a little bit of hardware in there just for that purpose is worth a feature like that.
Absolutely.
Up at the mountain, we had feedback destroyers for that, where they had the 4 different automatic feedback destroyers that would listen for and remember that frequency that they notched out. But we would even, over the course of an afternoon, like if we had 5, 6, 7 different bands playing all day, they would fill up those frequencies. So you'd have to reset after every once in a while. Otherwise, you'd fill up the frequencies and you start hearing feedback again. It's like, oh, we got to go, clear the filters again and let it reset.
Right. And now, like I said, now we're into basically AI.
They have a buffer. They have a buffer that you have to flush.
It's more of a cache. Yeah. It's more of a cache.
remembers like the last 10 frequencies, let's say, that fed back. So like, as you're going along at the beginning, the first time it tries to feedback, it notches out this frequency, and then that frequency is gone for the rest of the night. But it'll remember that, and that's on preset, memory 1, let's say. And then, by the time you get 7, 8 frequencies that are each notched out because they were each going to cause a feedback, you get that 10th one, and now it has nothing else to save it in. So you just have to wipe it all and start fresh, and then it'll just grab a couple frequencies at the start.
Yep.
Because there shouldn't be that many anyway.
But now you've got,
Now-
independent systems for that. You used to have to run feedback destroyers, just like Glenn was talking about. You used to have to run multiple feedback destroyers. That was the way that you fixed that in live events. That's how feedback got stopped. I think that started in the early 90s, actually. I don't actually know for sure on that, but I think it was somewhere in the early 90s, because you still remember seeing great performers from the 80s still get feedback. You remember hearing
I remember
it was
hearing.
yeah. And it's kind of a part of the show. But in the 90s, that started disappearing.
Yeah.
That was from feedback destroyers, things like that. Technology started catching up. And now we've got actual wireless systems. We've got speakers. If you look at the QSC line, like the K12s and the K10s, they've actually got feedback suppressors in the speakers too.
So it's working both ways.
Yeah.
So it's
You
not
got-
going to eat it. It's not going to eat it in the microphone, and it's not
They
going to spit it
have-
out from the speaker.
They have really come a long way on their approach there. That's genius too.
There's millions of different ways that technology has come about, but with that technology, and I'm definitely leading this conversation into a specific place. With that technology comes laziness and complacency.
Yeah.
You forget how to do.
Don't get too comfortable.
Yes, you forget how to do the basics.
Understand the
And-
tools, but yeah.
Yeah, you got to understand the difference between a patch cable, a normal patch cable, and an actual 1/4-inch mic cable. Or instrument cable. You got to learn the difference.
And you
between
should
those things.
understand. You should understand what that equipment's doing. It's not enough to have a piece of equipment that does what you want it to do. You should understand why it does what you want it to do.
Correct.
Understanding that kind of feedback technique, that's why this does this. That's a feature of it. Understanding that is as important as having it.
And learning about automation versus manual.
Yeah.
So, like for instance, a great example.
I've been going through that for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I was hesitant with automation, which is ironic because I'm a programmer. But in mixing, I was hesitant to turn on those automation knobs and start actually recording my actions. I was thinking, like, oh, it really was a slow process. Start automating some levels, start adjusting an effect signal at a certain time. Basic automation to get comfortable with the whole idea of like programmable mixing.
But even automation in your equipment, though, like for instance, what's the difference between a Focusrite 2i2 that comes in at about $140 versus an Apollo with the same amount of inputs? Why is the Apollo $1,200? Why? What are the differences? What are they doing
mic
different?
preamps.
And in reality,
Different
that's
mic
what
preamps.
yeah, that's what we're talking about, is what your equipment can do. I can get the same sound. All right, good night, buddy. I can get the same sound out of a $149 mic that I can get out of a Neumann going into a studio. How do you do that? Now, is it easier for me to get it out of the Neumann? 100,000%. Is it easier for me to use an Apollo versus a Focusrite? Absolutely. Is it easier for me to use a plugin? 1,000%. I'm not going to deny that. But if I don't understand the basics and why I want those things, then I'm just spending money and I'm never learning what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing money at a problem and I may never fix it.
And that's really
where
where
understanding the
knowledge
problem.
does
Yeah.
help you. Yeah, knowledge is money savings.
Yeah. If you're not saving money, like, what are you doing? You're a musician, man. You're gonna struggle. That grandma's birthday cards are not going to pay for your entire music career.
Well, it's funny. These days, we don't spend on our instruments the same way we used to, but I think we still spend in generally the same amounts, because the things that I would have bought for physical hardware, synthesizers 20 years ago, now I can load as a VST. but
Right.
the amount of money that I spend on the equipment to process it balances out. I'm still spending about the same amount. I'm just buying different things to accomplish the same thing.
Well, it's also
My
about
synthesizers
brand
are no
awareness.
longer physical.
It's also about
Yeah,
brand
and whether
awareness.
you buy, yeah, whether you buy that one that does come at a premium in cost, but it's built like a tank, like a Mackie. I love my new Mackie mixer.
Well, it's
Worth every penny.
For instance, the world of guitars. I mean, look at how much we all remember the days of Epiphone being the knockoff, right?
Mhm.
Epiphone was the knockoff. It wasn't a Gibson.
Yep.
But now you can get a $700 Epiphone that arguably maybe even sounds better than a Gibson at some points because they're more consistent. They're built on a frame. They're built on these things. But Epiphone, recently did something absolutely incredible. They went out and built a whole line of 58 clones that were done with the same practices that Gibson used before, using the same materials, every material that was actually legal. There's actually illegal materials in some of the old Gibsons. They actually went back to them.
I've heard of that.
They actually have real leftover 57s from the Gibson factory from those times. And so you're looking at these situations, you're like, wow, maybe my money is better spent not buying the actual Gibson. Maybe my money is better spent by buying the Epiphone. Yeah, it's an Epiphone. It has that name on it. It's not going to have that prestige of actually owning that Gibson, but it's going to sound just as good, and it's within my budget. And then I can buy a couple other things that I need. I can buy a bigger cab. I could buy a better. I could better buy
get the same
amp.
feel.
Yeah.
Feel a lot of times with guitars supersedes a whole bunch of other things. If it feels good, that for a guitarist, if that's what was my chosen instrument, I'd be going by feel first. Even with keyboards, even my keyboards, the two that I spent all the money on over the last 20 years were specifically for their 88 weighted key action, and no other keyboard that tried to do the same thing felt the same way. I picked by feel.
Well, and that, I mean, I can definitely attest to that because, I've been playing the piano since I was 8, and I started with a really, really old, it was I don't remember what the brand, it was a really old upright.
Oh, is it an upright? I was going to ask you, was it an upright or grand? Because they had different, they had different bounce. The uprights were almost like synthesizers with weighted keys.
The upright that I had was so old and it was so aged, it actually had really long arms on it. And so it had different size arms actually. And so it actually, when you open it up, it actually went from top to bottom, kind of a deal. You're like, wow. And so each key actually felt different.
Oh,
some keys were easier to press than
some
lower
snap
end.
back.
Yeah.
Some don't go down as easy.
Right. And so I learned this. And then it really, what it ended up doing is it ended up putting me in a position to where it was really difficult for me to play anything that wasn't weighted. Like if it wasn't weighted, if I didn't have that action on it, I couldn't play it. Like I couldn't, I
lose your dynamic range.
It completely, it messed up my fingers. It messed up the way that I didn't know if I actually pressed it. And then, it would surprise me when that sound came out, because it's just on a little sensor, you hit it, it's just boom. You're like, shit.
That's how I feel anytime I play my regular keyboards, the non-weighted ones. That's how I feel every time. I feel like I'm
like, oh shit.
I'm walking on glass on my keyboard, because all you got to do is just touch it, and the velocity sensitivity on those springy keyboards is like it picks up everything. There is some use for it though. I'm starting to change my approach mentality to play certain things with the springy keyboards and use the weighted keyboards for. I'm traditionally a piano player too, so when I write, I'm thinking arpeggios and nice, expressive from the weight of a piano keyboard, not so much the spring expression that you get there. But those are better for like those retro synth sounds. And if I'm going to do some Pink Floyd tracks, I like that keyboard.
But yeah, but what I'm, like I said, technology is just catching up to a point. And so it used to be, there used to be a clear difference between an Epiphone and a Gibson. Straight up.
Yeah, but they're
But
they're
now
doing so good to duplicate the process. I mean,
you can't
they're
even tell.
basically they're duplicating the process that they used to build those.
I played a classic casino the other day, a real casino, a real one. And I played an Epiphone, one of their latest models, right next to it. And I'm telling you, I could not tell the difference. They sounded so close. They sounded so close. They felt so close because, Epiphone is taking a lot of care to getting those actions right, to getting those things done. Now, I don't know. I know there's other brands on there like PRS, and I kind of have a lot of shame right now. Shame going on Fender because of the whole Guitar Center, scenario. And, I think an old Fender is worth a lot more than a new Fender. I think a new Fender is a piece of shit. But
They've had their moments throughout
right.
all the years.
But all
Fenders
I'm saying,
they're like Corvettes.
Yeah.
You have years where that was a kick-ass guitar.
But what I would say is no matter what, instruments, mics, your DAW, whatever DAW you're going to be using, plugins, whatever equipment you're picking up, make sure you understand that equipment. That's like the biggest thing I can put at people is that you guys have heard my tracks on a $150, not designed for this mic.
I can't believe you're using that blue on those tracks.
Yeah,
If
you've heard it.
I would not have guessed that listening to those.
And I do it live. And so understanding how to use your equipment is a really big step. Because I'm not gonna lie, I was of the boat when I first started recording at home on my own. I was like, man, I got to get a better mic. Man, I got to get a better mic. I got to get a better mic. And then I ran across a guy on YouTube that's using this mic. And I'm like, how does he sound that way? Like how the hell is he getting that sound of it?
It is a good podcaster mic.
Yeah.
I would have assumed that you bought that because you were like, hey, I'm going to do some streams.
Yeah.
I'm going to get a dedicated mic for that. And that's a good choice. The Blues have a whole bunch of good choices for podcasting.
Well, that's why I'm using my blue mic right here, my Yeti, to talk to you guys. That's what I'm using. That's what I talk on. This is what I sing on.
It makes a great conversation mic.
Yeah. And so the fact that, like I said, blue's not bad. But if you're not using it properly, it sounds awful.
Yeah.
Like absolutely terrible. And I've saved myself from spending money and being in the same boat that I was in learning how to use this mic by learning how to use this mic. Now that I know how to use it, my next mic, I know what mic I want to buy next. I know why I want to buy that mic. I have a very particular use for the mic that I'm going to be buying. And because of that, now I'm buying the thing that I actually need, not just because I need to sound better, but because I know that it fits my range, it fits my voice, it fits what I want. That's the mic that I want. And that's what I suggest to anybody, especially, I'm going to say this again, especially on plugins. Learn your basic plugins, because if you don't learn those, all those new ones are going to completely overwhelm you, and you're going to be like, why does this sound so awful? Because you don't know how to use your equipment. That's why. Oh, and I also use a free DAW.
That's why in Cakewalk, they have their pro channel, and I like it for if you're new to mixing and using a DAW. Once you get done getting comfortable in Cakewalk, bring up that pro channel, and it helps you to focus on every plugin you should get to learn: compressors, equalizers, what's the amplifiers that are in there. I mean, each thing that's in the pro channel, and they do give you a nice default strip. So like, if you're wondering what you should try or check out, you got a default strip with a whole bunch of things that are worth turning on. Listen to what it does. If you go in and load up a template, there's a whole bunch of templates that will load different pro channel strips, and bring up effects that you should get to know and set them at default templates for, like, say, drum room or, you know, distorted guitar mix. They've got presets that actually do help with, like, starting points across
what
most
DAW do
situations.
you use? What DAW did you use before Cakewalk?
I've been through like 4 across, going back to like 1987. Before DAWs, Cakewalk was my first MIDI sequencer right at the beginning.
Wow.
Cakewalk was the first MIDI program that ever mattered to me, and pretty much the first serious one for a MIDI sequencer. When it became DAWs towards the end of the 90s and going into the 2000s, I went from Cakewalk basically to Cubase for a while, a good like 5-6 years. Really love Cubase. I'm not against even using it now. It just serves a different environment for me. I really do like Cakewalk's workflow. And after Cubase, I kind of took a break for 10 years on music. And when I came back, I went back to Cakewalk because it was free.
Gotcha.
And BandLab, I was signing up for BandLab to check out what that was, and it turned out like I needed a DAW, and it was like, wait a minute, they now
Cakewalk?
own
Really?
Cakewalk, and you know, it was no longer Sonar, because I did use Sonar when I went from Cubase. I went back to Sonar for a little while, but Sonar had a lot of problems back then. The company Cakewalk had been bought and sold, and
Right.
by like 2009, you didn't know where your DAW was going to be in the future. It wasn't until Gibson bought it and put it under this umbrella that now you can be rest assured Cakewalk's going to be around for a while, because they are still actively developing, like, weekly.
Yeah.
I see updates.
I what about you, Glenn? What
It was
DAWs do you
also
use?
it was also Cakewalk from way back in the day, and then Cubase a little bit as well. But since we do have the PreSonus Studio One, or sorry,
Yeah,
the
Studio
PreSonus
One is
boards,
becoming.
we
So
got
you're using
Studio
Studio
One
One.
here
Yeah.
and over there. Yeah, but I do use Cakewalk as well for when we're doing stuff here, and BandLab to keep things on the same page with everybody else.
Gotcha.
But
So
I have the others as well.
I was kind of a DAW whore for a while.
Oh, I've got them all.
I tried all of them. You know, I went
Yeah,
from
you should.
I started with Pro Tools because I was like, oh, Pro Tools that's what's going to make me sound the
That's
best.
the
When I
standard.
first started, I was like, oh, we got Pro Tools.
Yep.
And then I was like, man, this is expensive. And then I was like, man, I don't know how to use this. And I was like, man, this is kind of confusing. And I was like, I don't really like this. There's so much going on in Pro Tools. I was like, I need something different.
You have a different effects choice over there.
Oh,
There
yeah.
are plugins,
Totally different.
non-standard. Like Pro Tool
No.
plugins are Pro Tool plugins, and not all plugins are created equal there. You
Right.
can have a plugin that you love in the VST world that's not available in the Pro Tools world. And you can load VSTs in Pro Tools, but
Yes.
because they want you to use their shit, they don't make their VST support well. So
No, it doesn't pull correctly.
I don't
Anyway,
like
so-
a DAW. I don't like a DAW that forces me into a corner
Correct.
with stuff like that.
So
That's
I moved away from
Why
Pro
I
Tools.
shy away from Pro Tools too.
And I ended up on Sonar for a while. I actually loved Sonar for a while. And then everything happened with them getting bounced around, just like you were saying, changing from Sonar to Cakewalk to Sonar, that whole big thing.
Yeah,
And so
what
it's
is
like, whatever.
this?
So I dropped off of that one, moved into Ableton. Really,
That's a popular one.
you really enjoyed Ableton for a little bit, but then started kind of running into the same problems with VST support and them kind of putting their own proprietary stuff out. Wanted to mess around with Logic, but Logic never dropped their Windows program. They never launched their Windows DAW outside of beta.
Yeah.
And so it just
Biggest
never
mistake.
took off.
Mm.
And then I accidentally came across Reaper. Now, a lot of people underestimate Reaper. Reaper is free as well. A lot of people underestimate Reaper, and this is why. Reaper has literally 100% VST, VST 2.0, and VST 3.0 support. They're the only DAW that has 100% support across the board. The only one. Now, not
Especially
only
with
do
the
they,
VST2s.
Yes.
Cakewalk is not so good with the VST2s.
so they've got this, and then they come out and they're like, you know what? This is what we're gonna do. They opened Reaper up to open development.
And And again,
And
that's
so
the
it's an
key to
open,
that's
it's
the key
open
to
source.
universal.
Yeah.
Making it accessible to everybody is the key to getting everybody to want to standardize.
For me,
Reaper's Jason's go-to. Our other metalhead.
for me, Reaper is the ideal DAW, not only because it's not super expensive to use, because you can donate to them and get a lifetime license kind of a deal. You don't have to. You can
Oh,
use it
really?
free. And they've been
What's it
telling you.
cost on their lifetime?
I think it was like $59.
Really?
Yeah, no, it's nothing.
Shit, man.
It's like 59 and change. It ended up being like 61 here in Utah because of taxes and shit.
And
But
that's throwing support at them. You
but
like this dog?
yeah,
Support it.
that's exactly what I did. I was like, I really love this. Now, what they did right, and this is how I compare it, is they said, hey, we're gonna make the Linux of DAWs, but we're gonna make it stupid easy for anyone to use.
Nice.
And so I mean, you guys have seen the interface on
Oh, yeah.
the way the DAW works, right?
Very nice and clean.
It's literally double click to add a track.
And
I mean,
the way that you can actually snap your different views, like Jason has a beautiful, on one screen he's got a nice console, it scales nice, he's got all his tracks right above. I am compelled to use Reaper more. For me, the big yay or nay is going to be how it integrates with my keyboard. Whatever DAW I use, I need to be able to
MIDI support?
load instrument tracks. If it doesn't load my instrument tracks for my Roland, there's like 4,000 instruments in there. If there isn't a library, a INS file that I can say, hey, DAW, when I click on this channel and I go to this on this keyboard, show me all my sounds. Let me pick on the computer.
It will.
Cakewalk is the one DAW that I've gotten to work with my keyboards, but I have standard keyboards. So I'm assuming Reaper, Ableton, any of them should support the same thing.
Well, here's the thing. If Reaper doesn't support something, someone goes, hey, they don't support that. I'm going to go ahead and build a plugin specifically for that. And there's literally, like, that's the beauty of it being open source, is there's so many people that use specific non-mainstream or mainstream stuff. You know, they use those types of things. That's what they do. And so they develop these plugins for you. And you can reach out to the community and be like, hey, let's figure out how to make this work. And they'll do that. It's the most, like I said, Reaper is probably the most intuitive, the most open source, the best. It's the best one to jump into, because there's also, Reaper has an entire huge, incredibly large video library on how to use Reaper.
Yeah, that's the best thing with open source. You
And
always
the
get
other
a
side,
huge library of tutorials and shit, because
the other thing is
users
they go
make
in and they go, hey, so this, you can also do this in this DAW. They're not afraid to throw other DAWs out there and say, hey, this is, you can do this here too. And it's very similar to how you do it here. You know, you do this here. It is like, oh, over in this DAW, you do it like this. Over in Reaper, you do it like this. You can do the same thing. It may be a little bit different, but we're going to show you how to transfer. And that's what I really love about them. They're incredible. And so I really give it to Reaper. I know I'm a fanboy in this end, but coming from being a DAW whore, as I say it, you know,
I gotta
I've been
get
around the block.
Jason on here with you. You guys can cheerlead it.
Yeah, I've been around the block.
I'm
with
under
them.
the. I believe any good sound engineer these days has to be fluent in any DAW that they would have to deal with as they work with tracks coming from different directions. If you're taking bands from all over the place, some of them are going to be self-producing until they come to you with work. And if you want their source files, then you need to be able to load that Reaper file or that Cubase file or that Ableton file and have all the things necessary for that project to move back and forth.
Daltonius, I'd have
It's
to
a big
disagree with you.
challenge.
I'd have to disagree with you, Daltonius, because we were just talking about one of the biggest differences between DAWs right now is the money that's involved with them and the exclusivity and independent VSTs and your ability to do what you're doing on any DAW. Unfortunately, not all DAWs are created the same.
No.
It's not. And unfortunately, one of the biggest problems that we have right now is we have, for instance, Pro Tools. Pro Tools is notorious for this. Pro Tools has a Windows-based side, correct?
It sucks.
It sucks.
I
It absolutely
hate Pro.
sucks.
I've
Why?
got it. I turn it off and I
Yeah.
don't even want to keep it on.
Why is the Apple side so good? Why?
Well, it's because that's where they develop it. And then they
Ah,
port it to Windows, and there's limited features in some cases. They push you to the cloud. They want you to do your DAW in a cloud. I'm on a
correct.
3G connection. I don't want to be recording on my music machine to the cloud.
Correct.
I need a local application. And on the Windows side, it's almost like they're trying to be what BandLab is, just with their online editor.
Right. And why can't I? Why can't I
Which
mix
BandLab
anything?
does for free. So, like
Right.
on Pro Tools on the Windows side, I might as well use BandLab.
Well, why can't I put a Reaper mixdown, a multi-track mixdown into Pro Tools and it loads up each individual track? But I try to take a Pro Tools mixdown and it will not load each individual track.
Because their
Why?
proprietary bullshit does not play nice with anybody else. They're not building
That's
a
why.
standard that people are going to build around. Reaper's open source approach is how you open source is where you make standards these days in any software, not just music. Like open source software is where development really happens
Yeah.
because the secret sauce to the program is not hidden proprietarily away.
Correct.
And that's where Pro Tools as an industry standard. You go to music colleges and it's like you're only going to learn on Pro Tools.
Yeah.
Then they're not teaching you music production for the future. They're just trying to push a certain solution on the it's like using Macs in school when you were a kid, and then no office you ever went to in the future was on Macs. So
Right.
the only thing those Macs did for you in school was like teach you, how to draw with pixels back in those days.
Right.
One
Well,
thing
I mean-
I can say about the multiple DAWs is that it's important to understand what you're looking at. Like, if you're
True.
like you're saying, you're getting files from different people, you need to be able to load them all, but it's also just important to be able to understand the workflow. Like if you just jumped into a DAW and said, can I make a song in Fruity Loops? Can I make a song in Reaper? Can I make a song in Pro Tools? And it's important to just, figure out, okay, well, this stuff's over here, this stuff's over there. And within a few minutes, you could acclimate if you're accustomed to any of them. So just getting really into whichever one you have is important too.
The real
True.
standard nowadays for transferability at its basic, especially with BandLab, the standard is stems. So as long
Yeah.
as you understand that, like, this is all the tracks that I make 60, 70 tracks on my project in Cakewalk. I have to break that down some way in order to send it to somebody on BandLab because they only let you put 16 tracks up. So
Right.
here's the bass tracks, here's the guitar tracks, here's the drum tracks. Stems philosophy that you've seen over the last decade is this is the universal method of which I can send you tracks and I know what you're going to hear is what I heard here. The problem is if you want to adjust something or change a mixed instrument in that stem, then you're going to have to give me a call, let me make the change, and here's a new version of that
Right.
stem. So it's not a perfect transition, but it does get the job done because what you hear here is what you hear there.
Correct. I think another
You
thing
just
that's
don't
really missed
you
upon.
lose a little of the mix in the transition. So you don't want to be doing that between engineers. Engineers should send source files to each other. I want whatever DAW you're using, and that way I can mix it here and send it back to you in the same DAW.
In the same format, yeah. For
with the
you though,
same
one thing that you
effects.
mentioned that really bothers me hugely, incredibly, big time, mind blown, bothers the shit out of me in the music industry specifically, and we're going to stay within this. Education as a whole has a big problem with this issue, but we're going to stick in the music right now. The fact that you go to a engineering school, producing school, you go to a music school, and they teach you, oh, we're going to teach you sound production, we're going to teach you audio engineering, and they do not start you on analog individual components. What the fuck?
The basics that you need to know in order to understand the digital analog
Like the
version.
fuck? Why are you, what? Like you're not teaching individual components? Like if I go to school for audio engineering, I expect to learn about what a compressor does, why it does it, how it does it. I expect to understand how an EQ works. I expect to have this giant fucking rack of individual components that I'm going to have to figure out how to
Well, they do
patch,
give you good
bus.
toys.
Yeah.
They give you good toys to play with,
Yeah,
but they
they're not the right
like you said
toys.
earlier. Well, like you said earlier, if the plugin does it for you, a lazy teacher will just like tell their students like, "Oh, just load this plugin in.
Yeah.
This is how you solve that," without saying like, "This is what's happening when you press that button."
Exactly.
And
Why is this
unless you can
frequency
bake
change?
this cake, just because you can put a microwave cake in there and hit start and have that, if you don't know how to bake a cake, then you might
Oh,
not
yeah.
have a cake.
What's the difference between delay and reverb? People ask me this all the time, and why I choose to put reverb over delay or delay over reverb sometimes, and sometimes I'll put both. But the fact of the matter is if you know how to engineer it right, you can make delay into reverb or reverb into delay.
Well, reverb's really about room definement.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
delay's about syncopation. What's the difference to me is I use delay to get a syncopation in a song that I'm looking for a certain subliminal echo.
Right,
I
but
use
you know what I'm
reverb
saying
as a
though.
glue because I've got all these instruments and I want them to sound like they're in a hall or
Correct.
a little room. Reverb is a great glue.
But once
Delay
again,
is
we know that. What I'm saying is, why can I like understanding the engineering and how it works makes it to where you can literally change delay and create a reverb effect,
it can have a reverb
and you
effect.
can change reverb to have a delay effect.
Yeah,
And if
yeah.
and you can do that, and we understand that, and on a very like a very advanced, or I guess I would say it'd be more an intermediate level on that end, but in intermediate to advanced level, we understand that, we know that because we've fucked with it, we've messed with it, we've screwed up tracks, we got, oh, how did you do that, how did I get that sound? You start dissecting these things, pulling all this shit out.
Well, and in understanding sound itself, there is a difference to a delay that you create with a reverb, because when you create a delay in a reverb, it's an echo, so if you were in a big hall and you said echo, 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 and the hall naturally did that, that's the delay you get when you do that with reverb.
We should have
The
it. We
delay
should
you
have
get
a
on a
competition
delay
on this.
pedal.
We should have a competition on this, because I can almost guarantee you that I can make a delay effect that you would think is reverb.
Well, you can, but the delay effect, even though the delay effect that you're getting might sound the same, in the analog world, it produces a different effect. Because with the delay processors, yes, it can sound like I'm in a hall going echo, echo, echo as it gets quieter and quieter, and the delay does its thing. But the reverb that's set to sound like the hall because it's built like it, still does it in a different way, a more natural way in the case of that. If I do want to sound like I'm really in the hall, I would use the reverb to get the delay effect. But most times I'm not looking for that when I use delay. I'm not looking to make it sound like I'm in a hall. I'm using delay for syncopation in a mix to get a bounce that actually bounces with the beat.
Well, it's also, it's learning how to use panning effects versus wah-wahs. It's learning how to use things like width and understanding how to create a bigger depth. It's learning how to cut. It's learning how to cut frequencies on a already completed music track to add your vocals to it. There's a billion different things that we could talk about in this, but when it all comes down to the basics, what it comes down to is
we'll have to have an effects
night. yeah,
we'll have to have an effects night and like focus on an effect for a little while and see where it's useful.
Correct.
And the basics are the reverbs and delays. Those are the first two that like I use in my buses. First two buses I make in a mix. These are the first two buses I make are for those two things.
I would say for learning though, like I stand by this, and I will always stand by this, and I will never change. If you are starting to record yourself, or you are starting to record someone else, the two things, as far as vocally, the two things that you need to learn how to use before anything else is a 30-band EQ and a compressor. Those are the two things. He's
gonna sell me on that, Glenn.
Yep.
You gotta learn to do it.
You're gonna make me load up a 30 band.
You've got to learn it. It's the most important. Those are the two most important tools when recording vocals. I know I'm talking vocals specifically right now.
Actually, on the vocals, I really should for that. Okay? You've sold me on it. I need to be using this on my vocal mixes.
on
Yes.
instruments, you know, that could be a completely different night too. We can talk about recording instruments, because recording
I'm
instruments is
lucky.
different.
With my instruments, they're all coming usually from controlled MIDI and controlled signals. I don't have to I never have to EQ my synth tracks because it's so calibrated that like it's always in the frequency I want. But
Right.
vocals is a totally different
But I
beast.
mean, you talk about, we can start talking about, you know, direct ins. We can start talking about amp and miking an amp and to record that way. Why you want to do it one way or the other? What the difference between the two is? What kind of heads to use? Why you don't want to drop a tube head directly into an interface? There are a lot of different things you want to be careful with.
And the same goes with miking drums.
Oh yeah.
I wish last time that I got
want
to play
somebody
with
to teach me
mics
drums.
and instruments. Me too.
Miking drums. I know how to play the drums. I don't know how to mic drums. I actually don't know how to do that. It's one of the things that has eluded me in the last 12 years of recording all sorts of bands and music and all sorts of stuff. Miking drums has been the one thing that I haven't done. I have never gotten good at it. I don't know how to.
Well, that is truly an art. I never learned it officially either. It is truly an art. But I did get to experiment for like 2 years. I was living in my buddy's studio and he was building it, and I built a egg around him using that like soundproof foam that they use for office ceilings. You know, it's really good at like bouncing sound back. Really cheap at Home Depot, and I built a giant egg around his drum set, and it was all tied to strings so that as he was playing, and the things that if I wanted to bounce the sound in different directions, I had like 7 microphones all going around, some at the drums themselves and some actually facing the foam to catch reverb going back. And it was almost like I got to put his drums into a built-in shower.
Do you know what you reminded me of when you were saying this?
You get in a shower, but with a drum set.
You know what you remind me of when you're saying this kind of stuff? You remind me a lot of Brian May. And I say that because have you seen, if you have anyone in this chat, anyone that's a fan of music, everyone should Google this right now. Look up how Brian May has his guitar amp set up. Not his Red Special. I'm talking about his guitar amps. He runs 6 box amps and he mics them in such a way, and they have power supplies designed in such a way. Every single one of the effects, he does not have an effects pedal. You guys know this, right?
You mentioned that the other night, which
he does
blew
not
my
have
mind.
One. He does not
I
have
was
one.
like, yeah.
Sound just comes from all the different amps with all the different
correct.
sounds.
And so like I said, if you are a music enthusiast in any way, shape, or form, actually look into what Brian May pioneered in the way that he started miking amplifiers, the way that he started playing guitar, and then you can kind of get into the Red Special and kind of see how he built a guitar. But when you're talking about, he does
have a distinct sound.
Yeah. But when you're talking about putting things up in like a drum room to get a specific sound, that sounds like something that Brian May would do. Like, hey, you know what? Let's do this. And it would create this grand thing to make this sound happen. And that's such a Brian, and that's why I said that. It was a huge compliment.
And they were all like that. Like you saw in that scene in Bohemian Rhapsody when they got in the contract and they were like, here, go record in this house for 3 months. Yeah. And there's this whole little segue for like a couple of minutes where you see them like doing the tracks. They're done with the tracks and they're like, oh, we got more tape or we got more time. Throw some pennies on this drum over here and let's see what it sounds like as you bang that, and put all this shit in the middle of the room and see how it affects. They really like experimented individually to create a very distinct sound.
That's key, is getting different sounds out of the instrument. So it's not just the stock sounds, but what sounds can you make? Let your imagination really go with what you could do with this instrument or that stuff. That's it.
I'm a huge enthusiast, and we've talked about this before. I'm a huge enthusiast of clean sound. I'm a huge enthusiast of direct in
Yeah,
guitars.
same here.
I'm a huge fan of direct vocals. Now, you'll hear the difference in some of my tracks depending on what I'm recording on. Like for instance, on this mic, I have to do a lot to make this mic sound good. Don't get me wrong, I do. I have to put a lot of work into it. But when you hear something that I've recorded on like a Neumann at a friend's studio, or something I've recorded on my SM7B at the live studio, when you hear
Your
those
friends let you play with some good toys.
they have fantastic toys, but we all share, and I do a lot of
Those are
stuff
good
for
friends.
them, and we all just do things for each other. I funny thing is, I am featured on a Christmas album this year that's going to be releasing in December.
Nice.
I am featured. I sang 2 songs, and now the funniest part about this is I have never in my life before I went that day sang these songs. I didn't even sing them prior because I didn't know what they were going to be. They're like, hey, I need you to lay down a couple. I was like, all right, cool. I go over to like Christmas music, and I'm like, oh, what the fuck?
I love Christmas
I don't
music.
know this shit. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna bullshit my way through this. And I ended up like doing this really wicked, rock version of like Little Drummer Boy. And then I did a really cool, really echoey and distancy Silent Night. And so yeah, I'll send them to you. I'll send them to you. They weren't my choices. They weren't my choices.
Oh, but they're nice choices for your voice. You ever hear Joan Jett's Little Drummer Boy?
Yes.
Yes. One of my favorite.
That was kind of the style that I went into it. I was like, I wanted to try to hit that. It was definitely influenced that way. But once again, I'd never done these before. And so the fact of the matter is that I went in there with the vocal discipline that I had learned. And I was able to lay down tracks that I'd never done before. And anyone.
And that's, if you're going to do one like that, Drummer Boy is a great one because you pretty much learn it like as you go.
Right.
It's one you can learn as you're listening.
But here's the thing, though. What I'm getting at with this is everybody that's in the chat that's thinking about, buying a mic or doing something like that. One of the biggest things that you're going to run into is you're going to buy this really nice mic. Really, it's going to be really nice. It's going to look really pretty, and it's going to come in a really nice wooden box. It's going to come in a box like this.
They do package them nice now.
And it's going to be, and you're going to be like, oh, you're going to open it, and the bike's going to be, oh, and it smells good, and everything about it. And you're going to plug it in, and you're going to go, yeah, and it's going to go, brah, and you're going to go, what the fuck? That's what's going to happen. I'm telling you. Learn to use a shitty mic first and get rid of that, because then when you get that new one, now you understand what those sweet tones you're getting for, those warm tones, that tube feel, or that, if you're going to be using a lot of auto tune, that really flat feel, you're going to start learning what it is you want. You don't know what you want yet. Most of the people on BandLab, I can tell you, they don't know what they want.
You should never assume you know what you want.
No, not until you know. Not until you know.
I think I've learned a ton of shit over my lifetime, and I can still safely say I'm not 100% sold on what I want. I'm like 99.9% what I want, but there's definitely some room for variation.
At this point, I am 100% sold on a couple of things. And one of those things is I want a manly reference. That's the mic that I want. I want a manly reference. It is the most incredible mic that I've ever heard, seen, felt. I know everything on the history of how the mics are built. I know that they're all built in Chino by hand. I know that their quality control is absolutely out of this world. The engineers that worked on them are absolutely incredible.
Hand-built mics?
Hand-built in Chino.
Really?
Everything. And they're absolutely 100% beautiful and fantastic. And so I know that I want that because it fits what I want and what I need. That's what I know. Without a doubt, I want that. I know without a doubt that I want PreSonus 32S because I know what I'm going to use it for. I know why I want that thing.
You do know your boards.
But there's other things that I'm not sure about. Like I mentioned, I'm getting an s01e19 and a Claret Octopre. I'm not sure I'm going to stay with those. I honestly don't know. I might go into an Ultimate Sound. I may go into an Apollo. I may eventually change my mind on that. But it's
The Apollo is interesting.
Yeah, and so I just don't know. I just don't know. And
It's good to have
because
options.
yeah, but it's good to have a baseline though too. Like I would literally, for anybody that wants to get into this, Focusrite has a starter kit, which is an interface,
Mm.
a mic, and a set of headphones and a stand.
I've sold
You
like
can buy it.
25 of them. I've sold
Buy it.
like 25 of them in the last like year and a half, with people who were like, I need to go from my phone to something, and they needed an interface, and those mic bundles. There's been at least 25 sales in the last year and a half
Buy one.
from me saying, just get this. It works. I know this person's used it, this person's used it, and they're all doing the same thing. They're moving from their phones to Cakewalk on BandLab
Cool. The beauty,
because
the other,
their phones are full.
what a lot of people
That's
don't know
that
is
started
that your
happening
phone.
over a year ago. Their software got so bloated like a year ago that all of a sudden everybody on BandLab was like, I can't use my phone anymore. And
You want to know
for
something
like the next
fantastic?
couple of months, I had like 20 people come at me like, I need to do this.
I'm going to tell you guys a trick. Really, I'll go over this in my show. You can put a Focusrite 2i2 interface into your Android.
Into your Android? Wait a
I
minute.
believe it.
Yes.
You mean as a like a
I can
virtual
record.
app?
I can record. No, I can record from my interface and my condenser mic into my Android phone into the audio recorder, and it sounds perfect.
Into the mic or to the line in or to
USB in.
USB? Oh,
USB in.
Lightning port?
USB-C.
Yeah.
Direct from your interface. Direct from your interface.
That-
Your interface will go direct into your Android, and it will power from the battery on your Android to power the 48-volt that you need for your condenser mic.
Now you'll suck that phone up fast, though. You
It will
better
die.
do a short recording.
It will die. It takes it. I've gotten about 2 hours battery life out of it.
No, actually, that's reasonable.
Yeah, about 2 hours.
I was actually thinking like half that.
Straight
But
from the mic.
if you can get 2 hours worth out of that scenario, that's fantastic.
You don't even need a fucking computer to record quality vocals.
Yeah.
You don't.
Sit in the park. Sit in the park and do it.
That's what I'm saying. There are options out there. You know, another option to look into. Zoom, the H6, H8.
Yeah.
The H6 is what I have here. Yeah.
Yeah.
H8
Glenn's the
is
man.
probably H8
Those
is
are
probably
really
my
cool.
favorite Zoom appliance ever. Is the
Are
H8.
you talking? That's the one with the 2 mics on the top, and then
Oh no, it's
like,
completely modular.
4 on.
It's completely.
I thought you were talking about their.
The H6 is the
They're-
one I
they're
have that has the
portable
mics on
ones.
top, but that double mic on top actually comes off, and you can replace
Right.
it with individual.
It's all
mics
modular.
for- yeah.
Yeah.
for
You've
interface
got
or whatever.
you've got different types of mics on it, like the H8. I think they have like 6 different types of stereo mics. They have a stereo, they have a large diaphragm, they have a condenser, a modeled mic. They have all kinds of crazy shit. Like it's absolutely insane. Zoom, like if you don't have a computer, once again, you can record directly in, and I mean directly in. You can record an entire song, mix, master it, add effects onto a single Zoom. It'll cost you $300.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one I've been using for live recordings, just the H6, but it's got, with the built-in mics, just capture a room from the back, but also you capture the room from the back. I could also take take the direct lines out of the board and get a board mix in there on tracks 1 and 2. And I could take 2 mics and fly them out in the back corners of the room and get a room mix from way back there as mics 3 and 4. So,
And he
all
does
that
get
in
some
one
good
shot.
ones.
Oh,
I've heard some of his different situations with that thing, and it really does do some nice room captures.
Oh yeah, you can punch in, you can punch out on them. You can do full multi-track recordings on them.
And the mic preamps don't suck either.
No.
For all the singers who have given reviews on it, because I was looking at that one back in February also, not that portable version, but they're one of their mixers, because Joe, like the one Joe has,
like their L8.
Their mic preamps are well renowned. Like people using them aren't complaining about them.
I don't like their mixing.
I haven't gotten to test their mic preamps, but
Not a fan.
Joe's using it, and his sound okay.
Yeah. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of their boards because there's a lot of very limited things you can do on them. All of their boards are single FX.
Yeah, see, I wouldn't use it for those.
Yeah, there's a
If
lot
I
of
was going to
different
get one of
problems
their
with it.
boards, it's the multi-track support,
Yeah.
multi-channel recording.
Their EQ sucks.
Well, see, I wouldn't use them. I wouldn't want to use their EQs. All
I'm
that
just saying
stuff
in
I do
general.
in post for general signal in, being able to multi-channel record on one device was why I was looking at them in February. I wanted something that could record on more than just channel 1, 2.
Yeah, I would. I mean, if I was gonna, I would. Like I said, I've been using an L8 and L16. I think that's what it is. An L20 or it's an L16 or L24. I don't remember what the number is. Numbers get confused. All I know is I've used both of them and I hated both of them. I just absolutely despise them. I love the handy recorders, or like the H6, H8. Love those. Absolutely 100%.
Yeah, that's
Huge
the one
fan.
that I'm really interested.
Huge fan.
That's a
But
workhorse.
But I absolutely despise their boards. Despise them.
Yeah.
Despise them.
I
Well,
didn't end
we're
up
at an
going with
hour,
that board.
and I'm out of here, guys.
Yep, it's actually we're just about an hour a minute, so it's
Yeah.
gonna cut us off in a minute here anyway.
Yeah.
But,
you gotta work. You gotta work in a few. Huh?
Yeah, I got to be up at 4 again. So, but I really appreciate the conversation. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, man. Anytime.
Oh, thank you
Glad
for
to have you
coming
here.
on, man.
And I hope it didn't run. And I hope it didn't run over too much because I tend to do that. I know I get really stupid excited and I start talking and I don't stop.
You
No
filled
shit.
time
You
out
want
just
to?
fine.
You want to talk about toys? I can talk all night.
All right, boys and girls, you guys have a good one. I am out of here.
Yeah, that was fun, Jake. Thank you.
I think that was.
And thank you all for coming to another episode of Talking Shhh I.T.
That
with
was a
Tony.
gentle landing.
You all have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you tomorrow night. Toodaloo.
Deuces.
Thanks, guys. Check you next time.
That was a blast, guys.